or I'm sorry, actually, it's the November 20th meeting, is it? Or no, 18th is correct, but 20th was included for the other board.
Correct.
Has everyone reviewed the late minutes from that prior meeting? Any changes needed? Okay. If no changes, then I would just need a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve minutes.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Vice Chair Angelides?
Yes.
Member Grocott?
Yes.
Member Ray?
Yes.
Member Perry?
Yes.
Chair Hubbard?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We are on to action items 4A, which is the Resolution 2024-12 Conditional Use Permit 23085. Do you need to read that entire portion?
I can.
Okay. I don't mind. This is a resolution 2024-12 Conditional Use Permit 23085 to the City Commission for the development of Windward Pass Resort, parcels 073216181430010010, parcel 073216181430010020, parcel 073216073980010170, and parcels 073216073980010230.
Would you like me to read the entire?
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you need to read that entire?
Would you like me to? It's up to you.
If it's required. Otherwise, I'm okay to proceed.
No, it's not a requirement.
Okay. All right, Brandon, will you be leading this? Okay.
Well, City Attorney, does there need to be a swearing in or a disclosure from any board members?
Is this on? Okay. Have there been any ex parte communications with regard to this property?
No.
No.
Okay. And we can have a swearing in of anyone who's going to be testifying.
Anyone who will be speaking to the board or making a presentation needs to be sworn in. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the information or factual representation that you are about to give or present to the board is truthful? Yes. Thank you.
Okay, if we could pull up the staff presentation. Thank you, Chair. So this is conditional use permit number 23085, associated with resolution 2024-12, also ordinance 2024-08. The applicant owner is John A. Bodziak, architect, who is agent for SunGold LLC. Location is currently unaddressed. It was formerly 3815, 3855, 3859, and 3861 Gulf Boulevard, located just south of Sun Harbor to the north of the Sand Cove Apartments. This is a two-part request. There are two different items on your agenda, but they're treated together because they're both part of the same project request. The first is Resolution 2024-12. The applicant is requesting to construct a 104-unit, 54-foot tall condo hotel with indoor and outdoor amenities, which include first and sixth floor outdoor bars with outdoor music, 12 Class A dock slips, which are hotel dock slips, hosting commercial water sports amenities and other commercial amenities that are associated with the resort. Ordinance 2024-08 is to draw all 104 requested temporary lodging units from the Town Center, Quarry Circle, and Coquina West Activity Center and Bayou Residential District Density Pool. Here's a timeline of the request. The applicant held a community meeting at the St. Pete Beach Recreation Center in September 2003. There was a technical review committee meeting for this request in February of this year. It was brought back to technical review committee in August. There had been some significant modifications to the plans, largely a downscaling of what was presented in February. The application was deemed complete for board review back in November. Tonight, of course, is the planning board hearing, and early next year will be the city commission hearings for this request. Here is a listing of exhibits. So to summarize the first part of the request, which is the resolution, again, this is the resolution associated with the conditional use permit. The applicant is requesting 104 temporary lodging units. The lodging building will be 6 stories tall, 54 feet in height as measured by the Land Development Code, which is measured above the base flood elevation. It will include 12 Class A lodging dock slips with non-motorized commercial water sports. Those will be pedal boats and paddle boards. This is a significant downscaling of what was presented at the community meeting, which is 28 to 30 motorized slips. The applicant is proposing first and sixth floor bars with outdoor music within the main lodging use itself, and lodging associated commercial amenities. These include a mini golf course on the northern part of the site, an arcade game room in a 3-story parking garage building to the north of the lodging building, and quiet and feature pools, the feature pool containing water slides on the south side of the site. And I'll pull up a map in a moment showing how those are laid out. The property has a bioresidential zoning. It is the same future land use. They are effectively identical in terms of their standards. It is located on the east side of Gulf Boulevard to the southern side of the Community Redevelopment District. It's located just north of the Maritana neighborhood and the Don Cesar. So looking at the standalone conditional use permits request, these are individually listed items within the Land Development Code that require a conditional use permit. Starting with the primary use, the applicant is proposing a 104-unit condo hotel. It will be 54 feet in height, as I mentioned before. That is a 6-story building, 5 stories above parking. This is made effective to Land Development Code section 42.4D. The applicant is also proposing 12 Class A lodging slips with non-motorized water sports along the seawall of the property. This is made pursuant to Land Development Code section 42.4B and G. The applicant currently has a lease for 8 slips of motorized lodging associated water sports, so this would increase it to 12 for additional slips. However, it would be, the applicant is no longer proposing to include any kind of motorized amenities at the slips. On the northern side of the hotel, the applicant's proposing a 6th floor bar with outdoor music, the same on the 1st floor on the south side of the hotel. These requests are made pursuant to Land Development Code section 42.4H. In terms of the accessory lodging use request, the applicant is proposing pursuant to section 39.6F of the Land Development Code, a separate building that contains indoor arcade with outdoor seating. This building is primarily used for parking, but on the ground floor on the northern side, they will have that indoor arcade. To the north of that, outside, is a mini golf course, and on the south side of the site, the applicant is proposing quiet and feature pools, as well as an indoor restaurant. So here's a quick breakdown of the development standard analysis. A more detailed analysis is provided in the staff report. Looking at density, the lodging units for the site, the applicant is proposing 104. That works out to be 38.8 units per acre. That is just under the maximum of 107 lodging units. And again, these are all allocated through the density pool. I'll get into that in a moment. So they're requesting 38.8 units per acre. They're allowed up to 40 units per acre with the density pool and conditional use permit request. The building will be built to the maximum height allowed for the district. That's 54 feet above base flood elevation of the rooftop. They are allowed an additional 10-foot encroachment for non-habitable facilities. They are 1.5 feet below that limit. 64 feet would be the maximum. They are at 62 feet 6 inches. The commercial floor area of the site is significantly below what the code allows for. They are proposing 0.13 FAR, effectively 13% of the site area, or about 15,000 square feet, will be used for commercial floor area. That's significantly below the maximum of just under 35,000 square feet. The impervious surface ratio for the site is slightly below the maximum of 85% at 81.4%. The applicant just meets the setbacks in the front, sides, and the rear for the buildings themselves. The applicant has applied in conjunction with his request for a variance to allow for pools to encroach closer to the southern property line than the Land Development Code would allow for. Pools are specifically called out as an accessory element that do need to meet the primary building setbacks on the side of the development. I understand that the applicant has prepared an alternative design. They have shrunk somewhat that request, and I believe they have that plan ready to present. But the buildings themselves, the scope that is under the purview of the planning board's review, it does meet the required setbacks for the development district. The applicant is providing significantly more parking spaces than required by code. They are required 106 spaces. They're providing 175. Now, they do have significant accessory amenities on this site. Because they are below 0.2 FAR, most of those accessory amenities they do not need to provide parking for, but these spaces are to supplement the accessory uses on the site. They are over what they need based on the land development code at the FAR that they're proposing. So moving on to the ordinance request, which is considered in conjunction, and it is an essential element of the conditional use permit due to the request that the applicant is making. So the subject parcels were zoned into the Bayou Residential District back in 2012. That was a rezoning from the Resort Facilities Medium District. In that district, 30 lodging units per acre and 50 feet in height was allowed by right. Under the Bayou Residential District, the lodging units have increased to 40 per acre and up to 54 feet in height, so a 4-foot difference there would be permitted with a conditional use permit. However, none of the units requested under this request are allowed by right. They all come out of this density pool, so all 104 units that are being requested would need to be allocated from the density pool for the Bayou Residential Activity Center and Town Center districts. There has been one allocation out of this pool since it was put in place back in 2012. It was to the Hotel Zamora, which shares the same zoning district as the subject property. They have requested and received 64 of those units, so the current pool unit count is at 261. Based on an original 325 units. If all of the units requested under this project are allocated, there would be 157 units remaining in the pool, as shown in the associated ordinance. So staff has provided responses to the different criteria in the staff report, but the summary, we find the following elements supportive of the Community Redevelopment District and the Bayou Residential District goals, objectives, and policies. The applicant is proposing a public promenade along the exterior of the site that increases water access, which is one of the goals of the comprehensive plan that is associated with the policy of increased pedestrian access through these sites. There is property consolidation. They are taking 4 parcels that have historically been used separately. They are consolidating them. That does reduce the number of curb cuts considerably. They are down to 2 curb cuts for the entire frontage of the site, which is something that the Land Development Code promotes, along with the comprehensive plan. Staff found the architecture of the development to be of high quality, particularly the garage. The applicant has done an effective job, I feel, at screening the purpose of the garage, which contains the arcade building on the northern part of the site. Staff does have some concern about the mass of the building, which we'll talk about in a moment, but the architecture itself, that modern Art Deco style, does seem to be both internally consistent with the buildings on the site and does seem to be of high quality. The applicant has significantly reduced the intensity of the waterfront functions. As I mentioned before, they are proposing an increase to 12 slips based on the current 8 slips that they have a lease for, but they are going to be discontinuing the motorized vessel rentals in favor of the paddle boats and, paddle boards and pedal boats. So that is a reduction in at least the motorized intensity of those waterfront functions. The applicant is proposing some family-oriented amenities that's generally supported in the city's comprehensive plan, providing districts that are appropriate for families with children. And it does increase the public amenities and the landscaping on the site, particularly on the southern end. The applicant is providing significantly more landscaping than required by code. In terms of some of the staff concerns, staff seeks additional support and testimony from the applicant regarding the following. Now, I have spoken with the applicant in the last few days regarding their technical and financial capacity to complete the improvements. I understood that the applicant provided the architecture for this development. I understand they'll also be providing development services and acting as the developer for this project. I'd asked them for examples of some of the other projects they have had and undertaken in the past that are of similar technical and financial complexity, and I believe they have those projects that they can share. I expressed in the staff report some concern about the massing of the building. There's ultimately nothing in the Community Redevelopment District regulations that require breaks in buildings based on their width. I understand that the applicant does face some challenges given the layout of the site. It does have a very unique aspect. It is much wider than most properties, especially given that the city promotes consolidation in this district. It has almost a bow tie design to it. It's much more narrow in the center than it is at the sides. So I understand there are some challenges faced with the site, but the hotel building in particular is fairly wide, and I would like to see the applicant, if possible, mitigate the massing of that building. It does I did speak to the applicant regarding the essentialness of the feature pool to the development as a whole. The quiet pool on the southern side is in character with other resort districts throughout the city's Gulf Boulevard redevelopment district. I asked for some additional support for the feature pool. The applicant has significantly shrunk the feature pool based on the new design, so I will let them present that. Staff had some general interior access concerns for the development. These were minor. These were expressed in the staff report, and they are addressed through some of the conditions that we're recommending if the board moves to recommend approval of this request. We had some concerns about the perpetual maintenance of the promenade around the exterior of the site. I understand that this is proposed to be a condominium-style development. I am not aware, and I'm not sure if the applicant is aware at this point, how they plan for the commercial facilities and the exterior elements of the site to be owned and operated and maintained. I would like them to speak to that if they know that at this stage. And the applicant has agreed to provide a transportation study. This development is significantly below the required number of trips the number of trips generated at peak hour for a transportation study to be necessary. They have agreed to provide a study following this meeting prior to the City Commission hearing for this request. But the applicant will, regardless of whether or not they provide a study, need to provide a transportation management plan. So if they know of any of these strategies at this time, staff would like to hear them. So generally, in terms of a summary, staff finds that the project can be found generally consistent with a comprehensive plan if adequate conditions are applied. The density pool is a case-by-case request. A conditional use permit must be evaluated on the basis of the 20 criteria, which staff has responded to in your staff report. Individual conditional use permit criteria within this request can be considered by the City Commission. That would include the lodging density and the building height, the Class A docks with the commercial water amenities, and the outdoor bars with music on the 6th and 1st stories. So going through the 30 recommended staff criteria, these are summaries of what are included in the resolution, but just to briefly cover what they address. In terms of density, the first two conditions, the ordinance must be approved to allow for the subject development. There is no allowable lodging unit density by right for this site. All of the units must come out of Associated Ordinance 2024-08. Condition 2, the resolution expires and the density pool units will be returned to the density pool if a building permit is not obtained within 1 year. In terms of outdoor music conditions, permanent speakers only may be placed in outdoor music areas. Outdoor music is prohibited between 10 p.m. and 7:30 a.m. And similar to other resort uses that have been approved recently, the applicant must allow for noise tests and utilize hardware or software to limit decibels to no more than 3 decibels above ambient when measured from adjacent residential property. That is the threshold at which noise is considered to be from one source rather than another. That's the basis, is 3 decibels above ambient. So that would be the basis that we would use to make sure that the music does not spill over to adjacent residential property. Looking at resort development conditions, the applicant shall provide a circulator drop-off, expand the frontage sidewalk and landscaping, provide protected pedestrian access through the garage, and relocate delivery vehicles from the frontage, along with demonstrate compliance with other development standards at the site plan issuance stage. Applicant shall implement development standards, unify parcels, provide aerial utility undergrounding easements, and execute restrictive covenants on unit use prior to certificate of occupancy. And the applicant shall contribute a proportional cost to a St. Pete Beach Emergency Services Master Plan. Moving on to operational and design conditions, the resort use must be completed and occupied prior to operation of any accessory amenity. The owner is responsible for perpetual maintenance of the promenade. No night swimming or night operations of the feature pool is permitted. Any significant design changes may require City Commission re-review. That's compared with the conceptual plans that have been presented to the Planning Board. All deliveries must be on site. There can be no deliveries from the center lane of Gulf Boulevard. Dock slips are permitted only non-motorized water sports equipment and customer vessels. Rendering submitted at permitting shall match the design prepared for the conditional use. The applicant shall provide a hurricane closure and evacuation plan. This is to allow for evacuation of guests at the hurricane watch stage, to allow for resources to be focused on residents when a hurricane warning is issued. Off-site utility improvements shall require the applicant to provide code-compliant landscape screening. The applicant shall install the quality, density, and amount of landscaping shown in the plan, and at least 50% of it shall be Florida-friendly. Frontage trees with substantial canopies around seating areas at the frontage of the site are preferred. Reclaimed water shall be utilized and metered for landscaping. The applicant shall comply with relevant code provisions in the timeline specified within the resolution. And the feature pool shall be screened by noise-reducing fencing or hedges from the Sand Cove Apartments development to the south. Looking at site improvements, the applicant shall be responsible for trash cans along the promenade, at least every 150 feet. They would be responsible for emptying them as well. Permeable materials shall be utilized for walkways and surface parking where viable to increase the permeable ratio of the site. The applicant shall be responsible for the cost of short and midterm Gulf Boulevard safety study improvements along their frontage. We've recommended this as a condition of other projects that have been brought forward. The applicant does actually have quite a few proposed improvements along their frontage toward the northern and the southern end. As pointed out in the staff report, they would be responsible for median extensions should the city undertake those in the future. The applicant is responsible for the cost of any off-site improvements necessary to accommodate their increased sewer flows. Payment shall be to the city, who shall perform the work. So rather than that just being a proportional increase with the city responsible for those upgrades, the applicant would be responsible for the off-site improvements rather that would be necessary to bring the sewer system up to capacity to meet their development demand, and that would be evaluated at the site plan stage through a concurrency certificate. The applicant has demonstrated, or if they're shown to demonstrate financial and technical capacity to complete the improvements, that would be found only for the subject agent and applicant. Transfer of development shall require reevaluation of this criteria for any new applicant who would undertake the project. Ending with energy and environmental requirements, all roof areas not utilized as customer spaces shall be planted with green roofs. Utilize cool roof materials or similar. Frontage fountains and other water features shall utilize rain and leak sensors. And finally, these are general conditions that we recommend for any case. The conditional use permit may be rescinded or modified if conditions are violated, and the city commission may periodically review this conditional use permit request to determine if the use is in compliance with the conditions. So as I mentioned before, separate action needs to be taken on the ordinance. So the ordinance 2024-08 would be a motion to recommend approval with modification or denial of the ordinance to the city commission. Resolution 2024-12 would be a motion to recommend approval with conditions, either the conditions recommended by staff or with additional conditions or modified conditions, or denial of the resolution to the city commission. That is all I have. We do have the agent present for this request. I understand they do have updated drawings to share with the board. Did you have any initial questions for me?
I had a question about one of the first slides that showed the docks. It used the, and this is also present in the proposed resolution, it used the phrase lodging dock, and I did not see that elsewhere in any of this packet, so I just wanted to ask, is there any significance to the word lodging being included there?
No, it's a basic description based on the land development code. The city classifies commercial docks as one of 4 different types, and this would fall under the resort lodging hotel dock type, which is considered a Class A lodging.
Okay, but it's still the same definition of Class A. It's there to enhance the primary function of the...
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Brandon, maybe this will be addressed in the new drawings, but I had a question about the heights, and Jeannie, I was going to ask you if you could put the bottom of the paper up there. Ah.
Have the overhead, please.
Just the bottom part for right now. I guess you can't really see it. Can make it bigger. Okay. So if I look at the top of the tower, it says that it is at 67 feet. And I thought the maximum was 64. And in the package, it says, it references the top of the elevator tower, but not the top of this. So that was one question that I had is, the heights aren't working for me.
Okay, so with it's the distance above NAVD is what the applicant is referencing here. So I believe
Now, NAVD is 74 feet.
Sorry, I'm having a
I know, it's in the packet, I think it's around page, I should have been the page down, let me see if I got it. Try page 130 of 200, maybe you can see it better.
So there does appear to be about a 1.5 foot difference between the actual measured roof height and the top of the stair tower, but it would still be compliant with the overrun. I did present it as the lesser of the two. So it appears that the NAVD measurement of 64 feet above the base flood elevation would still be in compliance with the maximum code requirement, as would the actual roof of the enclosed portion of the building at 54 feet above the base flood elevation. So it would be compliant with the code limitations on the non-habitable access components, but there does appear to be a difference. The NAVD difference is 10 feet, and the actual measured difference appears to be 8.5. So they are showing a slightly different measured
Well, the
distance.
stair tower I have is 67 feet above base flood elevation, yet here in this resolution, it says 64 feet above.
I understand. So that is 67 feet above the ground, level 1. So at the very bottom of the drawing, it's showing the level 1 to start at 5.5 feet NAVD, and it's measured at that's the 0 foot starting point for that. So base flood elevation is a number of feet above that, and I believe just based on the difference there, I believe that 8.5 feet of overrun is correct. But it's the city starts its height measurement at the base flood elevation, so that accounts for that distance.
Well, I see several discrepancies like that, so maybe that all needs to be double-checked.
Understand.
Another thing I wanted to ask about, and it's actually on the second part, oh, wait, before we go there. This thing up on the right side that says, is that a sign?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the sign, I think.
Does that comply with our sign ordinance?
If it's backlit, it would not. We do prefer signs of a smaller area. But I had asked, one of the conditions had been for a unified sign plan. That's not really something we typically address at the conditional use permit stage, but he would need, there are no variances to signs under this request. It would need to be fully compliant.
Okay. And then the second part of that sheet that I asked to be put up there. Okay, one of the things that I was thinking about was the turtles. And if you look, a lot of the buildings across from this are only 1 and 2 stories high. So that means that the lights from this building will be seen from the beach. And I didn't see anything in this package talking about, planning for turtle lighting. And
So-
I did see the pedestrian lighting comment, and I did see the comment about some of the parking places being arranged in a place that headlights could shine into the residents across. So I had a number of lighting concerns. There's the turtles, there's the headlights, and there's the lack of the pedestrian lighting plan. So I just wanted to make sure that somehow that was addressed.
So this is new development, so it will be held to the city's requirements for turtle lighting. And this current standard is if the light source is visible from the beach, it does need to comply. I believe under past developments, the commission had ultimately required a condition along the lines of the higher standard of the cities or the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So that might be something that the planning board would like to consider as a recommendation, but the minimum city ordinance turtle lighting conditions will be applied for this project.
Okay. And then on the boat slips, I know there's a lot of conditions around boats, and I did see the submerged land lease, and I did look at that. But there's also the license for livery. I mean, how is it assured that all these things that need to be taken care of are addressed? Do we have to make that a condition, or Because I didn't see anything anywhere that really talked about those two things specifically. The submerged land lease. I did see one of the residents put a comment in that I guess only 8 so far are licensed, so I guess they would have to apply to get more.
Correct, yes. That's checked over at the site plan permit issuance for the conditions. We work with the FDEP and the State Board of Trustees on those requests.
Continuing on with that question about the lease, the use of property description in the lease says this is a lease in conjunction with upland commercial vacant lot. So is this just something we expect to happen? They're going to change it to non-vacant lot hotel property plus make it 12 slips?
It'll have to be amended, and that's part of the approval process. Typically, it would come forward for the city's approval. If it moves forward from that, the applicant would apply to the state for the expanded lease. But there have been situations in the past where, there might need to be modifications beyond this. But we're setting a maximum development potential here, and then it could be changed later on. Mm-hmm.
I did see your comment about pedestrian access and where the pedestrians were, and I did see that as a potential security issue. So I'm hoping maybe in the new plans that will be addressed. But I thought the staff made a lot of valid points. I didn't really see them all reflected in your conditions. So I guess, how do we make sure that a lot of the valid points you raised are also addressed somewhere?
So I think there had been a condition pertaining to access to the commercial level of the building. I had just asked that the applicant move, particularly delivery vehicles, away from that frontage. That was something that made it into a condition. We also have, there was a condition related to direct access for pedestrians to the commercial level. However, the applicant would like to establish it. One of the benefits is that there is significant excess parking for this development, so there is some leeway with making those changes to the site plan if the applicant's amenable to it. But were there any particular points that you didn't see reflected that you'd like?
Well, I think the lighting, the part of the beach access by the Miramar on the south end, I looked at Google Earth, and that is a very narrow, passageway, and it actually, you can see the marks over the dunes where people are walking over the dunes. Mm-hmm. So I know as part of the Miramar, they're supposed to be looking at what to do about the dunes.
Yes.
But that's going to be an issue for this as well, because right now they're walking through the dunes, and you can see it. You also brought up some issues about the scale of the building. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. I feel like there's too much being put. I know the land is narrow, but I don't think that's a recent change. So I feel like there's just too much being crammed in there, and when you start having to look at setbacks and all these other things, I'm hoping when the new plans come forward that things are scaled down a little bit and some of these things are addressed. So I have more, but I don't want to take up the whole meeting, so I'll let you go ahead and
Brendan, I have a question on the transportation system capability under standards of review. So in the staff report, it said that the 2023 traffic study says volume to capacity ratio 0.75. However, since 2023, we've approved conditional use permits for the Serrata, the Tradewinds, the Miramar. And so, how we can't continue to look at this 0.75 as being the standard, what we currently have, when we know we have additional capacity already approved. So how is the staff looking at that to make sure we're not exceeding it by looking at these as individual cases instead of cumulative cases?
So that is the intent with the traffic study, is to treat them as cumulative cases. So we've had, as these projects have come forward, we've asked the later projects to include the impact of approved prior projects within their studies. We'll ask the same of the applicant.
Okay. And then as we talk about the utility capability of the utility infrastructure, so I understand in watching the recent, I think it was 10 December commission meeting, the acting director of public works stating that we don't have capacity for our current capabilities, load is how I understood that we were at a significant shortfall for this year, and then on a 5-year lookout specifically. So if we don't have capacity to meet our current requirements based on choke points in the system, deteriorating infrastructure, et cetera, I guess why would we consider going forward with a conditional use permit saying you only have a year to get this permitted, and then you have to go back to the drawing board or release the density that you've been authorized, when it looks like the work that Public Works has ahead of them is longer than that year tail that we're giving the developer?
So I understood at the beginning of the meeting, there was a discussion about the total build-out capacity based on the sewer pipe sizing that we undertook over the last couple of years. And that's looking at a potential build-out scenario of the various districts that make up Gulf Boulevard. Ultimately, it's up to the applicant to make those improvements. This is only the first step in the process. If the use itself is approved to move forward to site plan permitting, the applicant would need to apply for certificates of concurrency. Our engineering department would look at the case at that point, and if there is sufficient capacity, if the applicant is able to make the improvements that are necessary to support their development, they could move forward. If that capacity isn't there, either the applicant's on the hook to provide those improvements on their own behalf, or they would need to downscale the project, or it would potentially not move forward. So,
Okay, so, but as a city, we might not even be postured necessarily to be specific on our response to that, it sounds like.
I don't know at this time, and I don't believe the city engineers are
Okay.
present, but yes.
So even if approved, if the city cannot accommodate the capacity, and we are not prepared to be able to say we're at a point to build out to make the improvements to support this, then the permit would be denied.
Correct, and that's, yes.
Then the rooms are returned to the density pool at that 1-year period.
Correct. The applicant would have the 1 year. There might be other solutions. If they apply shortly after approval, they may have time to work out solutions with the city, but ultimately, yes, that would be the condition.
Okay. And then as it talks about the application and some adverse impacts on livability, specifically as we talk about noise and understand the rooftop bars and the decimal tests, I mean, I still believe that there's a cumulative effect when you have a Zamora rooftop deck, you have this rooftop deck, you have a rooftop deck across the street, et cetera. And I'm not exactly sure how the city is figuring that out, but how are you modulating noise from a feature pool? I was a water park, but now it's a feature pool. That's, I see closing hours or specifically talks about 30 minutes after sunset, which in the summer is somewhere around 8:30. I did have a chance to drive around the community at Val Vista. There is a specific cutout, and it's on the maps, where there is basically an easement, it looks like, where there's a nice little bench. It looks like it's going to make it a nice little alleyway for noise right down to Val Vista. So how are we planning on modulating noise for the residents of Bella Vista from a feature pool?
So I'm going to let the applicant present the modified design, because I think it has significantly modified that feature area to place it behind the building, which I think will provide a buffer. But other than that, it would be the hours of operation and the additional landscaping buffer. The landscaping buffer is conditioned that would primarily benefit the Sand Cove residents. It would not be as much of an effect on Bella Vista.
Okay, and then I have one other comment on, there was staff comments about the fountain and water conservation. And I think, again, I go back to that feature pool. I don't know what water consumption is for a water slide, a lazy river, et cetera, et cetera. Is there some sort of information on that, and how the applicant is going to, try to modulate it all, the amount of water that's going to be involved with this feature, and water conservation, as it's an important aspect of our community?
They may have that information. I don't have it at this time. They have, based on the design I'm looking at, and I believe they're prepared to present, they have significantly scaled down the size and the volume of the pool. So. Okay,
and then, I'm sorry, one more thing if I could. The 12 docks, I understand they're only leasing non-motorized sports. Are all 12 of those docks going to be available, though, for motorized visitors to come into the property?
So the applicant had not requested that. They had requested specifically the pedal boats and the paddle boards. There are general references in the comprehensive plan to just waterfront amenities, and I had added that in as a component of the condition to allow for customer vessels to visit. I don't know if that's the applicant's plans or not. They might be able to give more detail to that, but they had specifically only asked for the non-motorized equipment.
Okay, so I'll wait to ask. Yeah.
As a follow-up on some of that, in the comprehensive plan, it talks about this district being a transition area between higher intensity commercial uses and the density in the residential areas. And the comprehensive plan says a small bonus commercial component will be allowed on a limited basis. So I have similar questions to you in terms of, like, that's a very, very narrow canal or a waterway. And it's very shallow in there, and a lot of manatees spend time in there. So I don't know that I would call what's been proposed a small bonus commercial component on a limited basis. I think we need to hear about the new plans and see how it's been downsized. But currently, I don't find this consistent with the comprehensive plan.
I'm happy to move on and hear the applicant's presentation, but before we get started with that, on page 113, there's a Sunbiz printout for an MBT Management LLC out of Boca Raton, and that's the only place I've seen that, so I just want to understand who the owner-operator of this project will be.
I'm sorry, can you give me that page number?
Yeah, page 113.
13.
Is that on the application?
Yeah, it was in the agenda packet, the big packet.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it on here because it wasn't loaded on the iPad. The CUP application attachments.
I'll let the applicant speak to that because that was part of the submittal packet, I believe. I understand them to be the developer for this project at this point in time.
So they're the owner of the property currently, they'll be developing it, and they will also presumably be the hotel operator?
So the agent for the project present today is not the owner. That is SunGold LLC, but they will be performing development services for the site.
Okay, and will SunGold LLC be the operator of the hotel after completion?
That I'm not sure about. They can
Okay.
speak to that.
To look at the land development code, I just wanted to point out that in section 42.2, secondary uses, primary use is residential, secondary uses, commercial uses as a mixed component. Eating and drinking establishments may include outdoor dining in or drinking areas provided they do not provide for outdoor music. So the land development code specifies that they do not want to have outdoor music. And so that's I see that as a variance, but I mean, maybe the whole CUP is just a big variance.
Well, it is distinct. The applicant is applying for a variance for the setback for the pools only. However, everything else is allowable through a conditional use permit with density pool allocation. So what you just pointed out for the secondary use, that is an allowable use to have those outdoor amenities without outdoor music. Under section 42.4, which is allowable conditional uses, that's where they can make application for there to be outdoor music. But staff could not administratively allow outdoor music without a conditional use.
So going back to that, if I could just piggyback on it really quick. So on your outdoor music operation conditions, it talks about the first and sixth floor, and it says any other area of the site where outdoor music is established. I read that as that gives the property owner the ability to establish outdoor music anywhere on that site. The mini golf area, the swim up bar, the quiet pool. So we don't know, again, the total sum of where this is going, where there's going to be outdoor music and what that effect is cumulatively going to have. Is that correct?
So the city has general density regulations. Typically I've seen in the past where mini golf courses and other amenities like that do have some form of outdoor music. The applicant can speak to their intents with that. but it's specifically in the code that outdoor music associated with outdoor dining and drinking areas, that's where the city regulates. Otherwise, it's through the decibel levels that are already established in the code. But that higher standard, what's referenced in condition number 5, related to the 3 decibels above ambient, that's a way that staff has found to enforce the provisions of the code, because in the community redevelopment district, it's actually stricter 2 decibel limitations. You're not supposed to be able to hear music from adjacent residential property. So that's what we set in place to attempt to enforce that requirement.
I think one of my concerns is living on the water. I can tell you, sound carries.
Understood.
And I can hear stuff a mile away from my house down on Gulf Boulevard in my yard. So I think that's why that's a concern. Another thing I want to just mention is in the Land Development Code, section 42.4, allowable conditional uses for the Bayou Residential District. There's a list of what they can have, and the dock is there, the temporary lodging. But it says under 42.5, all uses and structures not of a nature specifically or provisionally permitted herein are hereby prohibited in the Bayou Residential District. And as I look at that list, there's a parking lot, there's different, and there is some outdoor dining and things, but it doesn't talk at all about, the feature pool or the mini golf. It's.
Yeah, there was a public comment that raised this concern as well, where these accessory uses are not in the explicit list of conditional uses for this district.
And so this is one of the allowances for a temporary lodging use, and it's not in that district division specifically, but section 39.6 of the Land Development Code, item F, talks about that temporary lodging uses may include accessory uses such as recreational facilities, restaurants, bars, meeting space, fitness centers, spas, parking structures, and so on, items that are typically associated with a temporary lodging use.
So is the code arguing with itself then? I mean, because it clearly says what's allowed in one place and something different in another place.
So I think those would also, some of those uses could be operated as standalone. For example, the current lease for the dock is for a dock on a vacant parcel of land, a vacant commercially zoned parcel of land. Some of those conditional use permits could be operated separately if that were to be the entire primary use of the development. But in cases like this, temporary lodging uses are allowed as a conditional use, and through that, these additional accessory uses can be enabled as well.
As David said, we did read all the resident comments, and I can see where people would be confused as, people are sending us parts of the code, and it says it requires this, and then, so I think I can see where there would be confusion.
Understood.
The other thing that I was looking at was the drainage easement that's on the southern part of the property that I believe the diagrams are looking to move it more to the middle. And what was going through my mind as I looked at that was what a disruption that would be on Gulf Boulevard to try to relocate that easement. I don't know at all, what's involved in that, but it sounded to me like it would be a major change for Gulf Boulevard to move it.
That is an on-site easement, so the applicant will need to demonstrate at site plan permitting, if the use is approved, that the site retains its pre-development stormwater.
Wouldn't you have to move pipes and things to relocate that?
Is this easement just a storm drain from Gulf Boulevard?
I believe it's just a drainage easement.
They'd probably chop up the sidewalk anyway as part of this and just relocate the pipe. But
Okay. And I know you also asked for the 2 green building standards to be met, and I don't know if that's happened yet or if that's still an open item.
It is not. The applicant may have in mind what he plans to introduce.
Okay.
Brennan, on the wall, that's on item 21 for landscaping requirements. It's 6 feet in height, comprised of one of the following, and it gives the sound fencing or live hedges, et cetera, is 6 feet based on an existing code, because I believe those apartments that are right next to it, do they have garages underneath those? So the first actual residence is probably even above the 6 feet. That's going to be right there where that pool is. Why did the staff come up with 6 feet?
It might be taller. The intent of that was really to mitigate the at-grade noise from users of the pool, just to limit that to some degree. But there's no limitation. It could be taller. Certainly a hedge would probably be considerably taller than that. So
Again, I think at-grade just is parking spaces to that property to the south, because the actual residents start on that second floor, I believe. And that would be the front of that excitement.
Any other questions for right now? Should we?
I'm anxious to
All right, yeah, we
see
can
the new
see the
revised.
presentation.
Yeah.
Good evening, or whatever it is, afternoon yet. Jack Boziak, a local architect and developer. I've been involved in development on the beaches and throughout Florida since 1968. I'm 80 years old. I've been around here quite a bit. I've played an active role as the primary developer of major projects. Cabana Club on Sand Key, I did in a joint venture with Citicorp. Beach Cottage and Lighthouse Point. I could name, over 100 projects that I've been the developer on. I undertook this project in that I had been taken into place as the architect on 3 previous occasions on this site, where plans were put together, everything was ready to go, and the people that were at that time under contract to do it over the last 15 years, after going through all the initial steps, decided not to do the project. A lot of the reasons that the project has been somewhat difficult to put together is the unusual nature of the site really is quite a conflict to deal with. If you notice the site, I guess the best thing is for me to get this on the screen, if you don't mind. Well, if I can figure out how to do it. Here we go. Let me get to the, you can see on this illustration, this is the best one. The site is at its widest points and most developable points on the extreme ends where the 62-foot setback comes into place. The drainage easement that you had addressed during your review, as you can see, is in the middle of the site. Right now, the drainage easement goes almost straight, not quite, back to the water. In review with the engineering department, they had said they would entertain, they would be in favor of, we would not relocate the intake. The intake is on Gulf Boulevard. The intake and the pipe have got some problems and need to be rehabbed. And we agreed that we would undertake the rehab of the pipe, change the angle slightly on the easement, and that's why you see that is where it is. It was not on the perimeter of the site. It's always been right in that location. Okay. And the drain is about where you see those 2 little red arrows. It's an unusual site because you can see the narrowest point on the site, which is down where you see what looks like a parking lot. They're buildable when you take the 40-foot setback out of the road frontage and the 20-foot out of the back. I believe the site has less than 75 feet in that portion. So as the site goes towards the middle, it gets narrower, and a larger percentage of the land is taken in by the setbacks, the 62-foot setbacks on each extreme. So as opposed to most of the sites that you see, even on the adjacent properties up and down the beach, this site, instead of being wider or deeper and narrower, it's so extensively wide because it's made up of a bunch of components, and I'm sure most of you recall over the years, the bar, the liquor store, the small hotel, everything that was strung along there, and all these little properties that were combined to become this one site of large size. It's got a strange shape to it, and it makes the site more difficult to build because you can't build in the front because of the 40-foot setback. You can't build on either side where the most buildable land is because of the 62-foot setback. So it is a very difficult site to work with. We felt that as one of the components, my first job out here in '71, I did a little job with, I don't remember the guy's name. Some of you may remember that wacky guy that wore jungle gear all the time and had a little shop on the west side of Gulf Boulevard, kind of across from where Shell's is. So I've been on this beach for quite some time, and the difficulty with this site compared to most of the other ones is that it lacks depth. And when you're given a palette to work with that has width and no depth, you just have to work within it. It's a condition of the site with all the different things that were there before. They were relatively narrow and small parcels. So I think that the consideration of the drainage easement going through the middle and the large setbacks on the sides as well as on the road front greatly limit the ability to consolidate this site and make it look like most of the ones across the street, which are very deep and very narrow. To address for a minute, having worked on some of these sites even recently, most of the small sites across the street, especially in light of the storm damage that's taken place, I think you're going to see a lot of those small one-story sites that are built on the ground disappear. FEMA is just pushing everybody to elevate, and I think that they're not going to be able to rehab those small one-story sites. They're going to have to entertain making a bigger use of them. I've done a study on one of them already, and the only thing that makes the sites viable across the street that are called out as being a lot of them are one story is the fact that they have height ability, the ability to go higher. As much as additional height up to 70, 80 feet is not the most desirable thing, these sites somewhat are limited by their either width or by their depth. In this case, it's depth, not width. Most of them are width. I think that I lived on Bella Vista for quite a few years, and I do understand about the waterway going back in, and how narrow it's been that way, since I lived there. I don't know why it's never been dredged properly, and it just always seems to be a very difficult spot to maneuver to get out in a boat. I would suggest that we tried to preserve. One of the things about this site is the public has been limited as to access to the waterfront in St. Petersburg Beach and in most of the beach communities. We attempted as a compromise, recognizing the width and the unruly nature of the site for development, we attempted to put in this promenade that would be a public access easement that would circumvent the entire site and try to avoid the limitation of the public. If you have these huge yard setbacks, what do they do if nobody can walk through them or go anyplace? I mean, to me, it seems like if you're going to have 62-foot setbacks, you would want to have the public have some availability to get to the waterfront yet. And we did locate some seating areas along that area all the way around the site, as well as the promenade, as we call it in our presentation, that goes around the entire site. To address the boat docks for a minute, I think Brandon and I may have had a minor. We originally had somebody that wanted to put jet skis in there, and the people across the way objected to it, so we limited it to non-waterfront. We did still want to allow visiting boats for people staying at the hotel or visiting boats for a day to come in and use the docks, but we were not going to have jet skis and that type motorized water vehicles of that type. So that kind of, I wanted to clarify that point. I do understand the turtle lighting and all we do. We probably have 20 active architectural projects up and down the beach. We currently have 4 hotels, waterfront hotels in the beach communities along here and down into Bradenton, as a matter of fact. So we do deal with that on a regular basis, and we understand how it has to be handled. I think that's an important aspect of working a project of this magnitude in. I think that the unfortunate thing is that this site has been vacant and misused and unused and just not properly used for such a long time that now it's down to one of the last sites of any size left on the beach. And when I've seen these mega projects across the way get approved and push their way through, I felt like they don't have half of the desirability of this site, and that we tried to consolidate the growth or the buildings into the middle and make proper use of the accesses around the site. Now, as to Brandon's comment about the feature pool, I do have, I don't know, can I put this on the screen somehow? Okay. What I, okay. Let me do it this way. Okay. What I did is I created about 40 foot of landscaping and relief from the adjacent property lines. Now, I will tell you that the adjacent building is of a similar height in a way, the older building that's been there. Across the street, there are some high-rises. And as I mentioned, with the current dilemma that we're all faced with out here on the beaches of the destruction we faced, you are going to see other high-rises there or higher buildings across the street. I think that they greatly limit, even if you take 20% or 30% of their side yard setbacks, they're only 150 at the best feet wide. They're going to create a side yard setback of, 30 feet. They're not going to be very accommodating to view or access for the public. Basically, let me try and get my notes together. I kind of went off track because I wanted to answer some of the questions that had come up. Specifically, the shape of the site has created what we have here today. And I think that when you take a look at the building, let's see if I can, whoops, can I get back on this again? You can see where, by the way, I did pull the feature pool from what it was on this view all the way back by about 25 feet further from the side property line in order to accommodate the concern that Brandon had expressed about its intrusion into the side yard setback. The reason we created additional parking was if you look at everything on the beach presently, we were approached by a major company that is in the process of trying to put facilities on the beach. We didn't think they were a good fit because it was Sports Illustrated, and they had ideas about all the sports facilities and all this stuff. But when we started to look at this with Sports Illustrated, our concept was that there really are no full resort with a lot of people come to the beach with their kids. They come for a week. They spend the first day on the beach. The kids get fried. They come back to the room. Second day they go to the beach. They bake the kids a little bit more. By the third day, the kids are saying, "What else can we do?" We tried to create a situation where we put enough of amenities, let's call them, on the site that people would be in really a total resort where they didn't have to leave the site every day to go to something else. So I think our concept was to do that and create really a total resort type facility. Funny conversation I had with the prior city manager was we were talking when we first started looking at this site, and I said I wanted to put additional parking on site. He said, we don't want any additional parking. Well, 6, 7 years ago, we were approached about putting some of these additional parking lots up and down the beach. People are going to come to the beach, whether you give them someplace to park or not. Unfortunately, that's what they're here in Florida for. And we're talking about residents as well as visitors. And when he said that, it was like, they're going to still come to the beach, but they're going to park someplace, or it's going to become a problem that you have to either deal with or try and just ignore it. And I think that we tried to deal with it and realize that we are going to have people coming in to the resort to visit people, to make use of the facilities, and we wanted to try and create a facility that was attractive and did create additional parking aside from what we needed.
Would that suggest an intent to sell beach parking?
Pardon me?
Would that suggest an intent to sell beach parking?
I'm not sure that we would necessarily sell beach parking, but we felt like we're going to have additional people coming onto the site, realistically, if we put all these additional facilities. Whether we really hadn't thought about using it as a pay-for parking lot. It would probably help the area significantly, but that is not part of our intent. As I said, the shape of the site at 650, 60 feet long, 70 feet according to how you dimension it, you measure it, and a width that goes down usable to about 45 feet in the most buildable part of the site. We had a tremendous handicap to deal with on this site, and I think that we tried specifically to consider making the best use of the shape of the site. It's just unfortunate that it does make the building look much longer. Let me show you the elevations, and I can explain a few different things. Now, on the whoops. Okay, just a minute. Okay, the pool that you see on here would come back, and the feature pool. You see where the 99 figure is on that? It would be now pulled back to within that 10 feet of that line, that setback line. So it would not go out into the setback 50% of the way it's diagrammed on the one that you see before you.
Can you explain exactly what a quiet pool is? Because I think children will make noise.
We figured that the feature pool is going to be one where there are going to be a lot of kids. We tried to tuck it. Well, let me go back to that again, and I'll show you. You notice how we tucked it behind the building to shield it from the waterway. That's why we put it behind the building. And then we put a pool up in the front that would be more the adult pool and would accommodate the people that wanted to go, not have kids splashing around on slides and swimming around making a lot of noise. So we tried to shield the noisier element by pulling it now even further behind that end of the building. So I think
But that's adjacent to the water, so that will that's adjacent to the water, so that will travel right across.
The quiet pool, yeah, but we're going to limit, close it at sunset, and not have, any real loud act. The bar that's there is really small. I mean, it's not a 25-seat, I think, or 30-seat bar. It's not meant to be a bar accessed easily by the public. The rooftop, to address your concerns about noise, I do understand that. I've been, the Swigwam I dealt with, 20 years ago down here when Bill Gay and, excuse me, not Bill Gay, Bill next door, I've forgotten his last name, I dealt with quite a bit when we were getting the project, the south end of Quarry Avenue, approved at that time. But after that, the Swigwam was a noise factor. We reorientated the bar, changed the direction of the sound, and we wound up accommodating the condo next door. So noise can be controlled. I think that the management of this thing would have to, we were previously had a tentative interest from Marriott, and I would say tentative approval, the local Marriott agent. We do work closely with Marriott. We work closely with, we did the Cambria up in Madeira Beach, and we've done several other hotels. I think that the management of the thing is not meant to get around the rules or create a noise element. When we spoke at first to Brandon about it, we said, you know, we don't intend to put a rooftop bar that attracts unusually loud crowds. They're large crowds, excuse me. They're relatively small, both of those bars are. They're mainly a function for use by the visitors. So,
No, the Quiet Pool has a swim-up bar in it, right?
pardon me?
The Quiet Pool has a swim-up bar? Is that accurate?
It doesn't have a swim-up bar, actually.
Oh,
It really has it has a little pavilion above, like just a covered pavilion. You know, you can only sit in the sun so long by the pool, and it's nice to have someplace to go to that's.
So which amenities are intended for general public use, and which ones are targeted for the hotel visitors?
I think the main target is the hotel visitors, with naturally the hotel, the restaurants, those facilities. We would like to attract a limited outside use. We had addressed that once in our comments. Please recognize that we started this quite some time ago. And Brandon, I think, will back up the fact that we unfortunately got behind the trade winds and the Serrata, and we were delayed a few times on the process. So, and we're fine with that. So this project has taken a lot longer to get before you today.
So how is that enforced? I mean, what if people wanted to come and use the game room and all that? I mean, is it enforced by the number of parking spaces, or? The miniature golf, the putt-putt golf, and the enforcement on the pool, the feature pool, would be by limited availability to the public of the pool. The putt-putt golf course we intended to run with the game room. A lot of you remember down on Treasure Island, the old Treasure Island game room. I mean, on the beach now, outside of going out to the beach, there are not a lot of things to do for visiting families. It's gotten kind of greatly limited. The old Treasure Island game room, I'm sure everybody here either went there or was drugged there, had your kids or grandkids drag you there like I have. That used to be a major facility on the beach. Nothing like that anymore. Very limited.
For the feature pool, can you define limited? If you're going to allow non-guests to participate in that?
We had talked about, when we ran our economics, we ran an element of outside use of between 25% and 30%, roughly.
So how does changing the name from featured pool or from water park to featured pool, if you're allowing people from the outside, really change that?
Well, I mean, most of the hotels on the beach allow outside visitors. Tradewinds, Serrata, they all allow outside visitors. We didn't think that was an unusual approach. Do they accommodate? Did they plan to accommodate the parking and everything? I don't think so. Not in the original plans. We're trying to accommodate not just the parking there, but also parking generally for the facilities around us.
Brendan, are there any clarifications on water parks being an amusement park? Is there different zoning for something like that?
So I think it's intended for it to be a accessory to the resort. I do agree with the applicant. We don't restrict resorts from having outside guests who aren't staying at the hotel use the facilities. I think it really comes down to a judgment on the extent, the degree to which it's held out to the public, how it's oriented on the site. I would definitely feel that the other amenities to the north side of the site are oriented, they're accessible by the public. There's no dedicated parking area at the northern part of the site for those facilities. So that, I would say, is probably more held out than something like this, just based on certainly what they provided for the amended size of the facility.
Do we have any other quote-unquote resorts that abut residential other than Silver Sands? And I know they would disagree with the noise coming from what used to be the Swigwam in the back of PCI. They still have problems to this day, so I don't know that I agree that that has been mitigated. But I can't think of any other situation other than Zamora, which generates similar noise complaints,
And the Red, White, and Booze.
who's now suing the city because we seem to get noise ordinances very wrong, which makes me inclined to not want to grant exceptions.
Well, I believe Tradewinds and Serrata both abut the C-Mark, which is residential.
Yeah.
In terms of single family, it would be the Hotel Zamora with the residences to the east.
Okay.
So,
Sir, I just want to clarify, so you have removed the swim-up bar from the plans? Because they were in the site plans, or
Okay.
they were in the plans in the packet, that there would be a swim-up bar in the quiet pool. So that is no longer going to be present?
There is a bar, there's not a bar outside. There is an indoor, a small indoor, I remember right, it's 25, 30 seats, the maximum indoor. The idea was just that it could serve not so much an entertainment function, that it could serve drinks to people that were using that, adults using that pool. We were going to limit that to adult use. Let the kids play in the future pool.
Okay. And I think just, for general comment, I think, obviously a lot of concern, but, there was an article in the 6 March Rising St. Pete, and I believe you were interviewed in that and talked about in Indian Rocks, similar development that had been in effect, and said it grew an incredible crowd. And I think when we hear terms like this feature in another location drew an incredible crowd, it has to be us reason to kind of pause and think about and continue to ask those questions. So I just put that out for comment.
Yeah, the one though at the other, at the Holiday Inn up on Indian Rocks Beach, that stands in the parking lot and is, has its own parking and is set up as a feature not primarily related to the hotel. It is really, if you've been up there and seen it, it really is an outside function. It's not a function of that hotel. So it's totally different approach. We're taking an approach of the primary use is going to be resort related. We just felt that if you look at the resorts on the beach, there just really are no real total facilities that offer all the family functions that would encourage a family. The units are all 2-bedroom. They are condo hotel units. We do intend to run them as a condo hotel operation. We've done a bunch of condo hotels. We were involved in the Madeira Beach one, which density does generate taller buildings, but we did the condo hotel units enable you to control a little bit differently the functions and how they're handled within the building. That's why we kind of felt like we could maintain some kind of control, and that's also why we had no problem with trying to move the feature pool out of the setback more and tuck it further behind to shelter the people over in Bella Vista from noise. There were bars on this site before with outdoor seating. There were, whether you remember the old ones that were there, and the liquor store. To me, I think we've done a pretty good job of trying to control the elements to try and keep them from, and take the people in Bella Vista into an account as far as trying to at least do the best we can minimizing the effect. Even as to the noise generated by jet skis. We had a guy that wanted to rent, half of the slips as jet ski. Now, there presently is a lease for, I think, 32 spaces out there. The docks are still partially there underwater. But, that site's been through so much. You talk about lights and cars. It's been a parking lot. It's had fences around it. It's had landscaping around it. And it's, I think it's time that the site get put into a use that is well thought out and that is more accommodating to the beach community or the beach visitors, which really is one of the main functions out here.
Do we have a measurement of the distance from the water slide to the apartment building to the south?
Well, the apartment building in the south, that's the The water slide is 65 feet plus, I think it's a 15 or 20 foot, 15-foot setback on that side. It's about 80 foot.
Okay. My concern is, well, my daughter's here and she's well behaved right now, but kids on water slides make a lot of noise. And if I lived in those apartments and I was working from there and listening to kids yelling all day long, I imagine it would be a little frustrating. So my concern is that noise going in that direction.
Well, that's why we attempted to try and limit the hours somewhat and not make it a night and day type operation. I think that, you know, as I say, it's unfortunate that had this site been shaped like most sites on the beach and had the depth to allow us to put or properly arrange all these and decide whether we're sheltering the people in Bella Vista or we're sheltering the people in the apartments next door, you know, it would have been a much easier site to work with. But you have to look at the great limitations we've had on here with, you know, the most buildable part of the site's less than 50 feet front to back.
Could the pools be located in the middle between the two buildings?
Well, then you have to, you know, let me show you a little bit. We did make attempts at, the building is not as one-dimensional as it seems. Like that's a really long indentation in the middle that you see where it's like a courtyard in the middle of that. And when you get to the rear of the building, let me try to give you, and that's one of the street front. In the street front, in the 40-foot, what we decided to try to do was create public, along the public right-of-way, create seating areas and wherever we, you know, got a chance to try and create these type of sort of breaks in the sidewalk. When we originally looked at this, they were encouraging retail along, strip retail along there. First 3 plans that I think we did for people on this site had commercial retail on that site area. Let me see here. Oh, okay. Let me show you. We attempted to try on the waterfront we've attempted to try, and you can see the 3-dimensionalized part of the building. It's not a flat run of a building all the way across. We tried to avoid that. That's why we inset some of the courtyards. It also reduces the number of, you know, balconies and things overlooking adjacent properties throughout. Now, whoops, I was going the wrong way. Nope. I was trying to get to the public promenade. I want to show you the waterfront side of it is pretty broken up when you see the elements that we tried to create on the rear. Here's the waterfront facade. You know, we made it a pretty decorative. We didn't just spend all our money on the road front. We made a pretty decorative rear to it, and it has different setbacks. Like you see the gray part in the middle is set back significantly. Everything steps back as you go along. And we created, as I say, we tried to preserve public access to the water because, you know, if you're going to say you're trying to attract people to this facility, you just can't cut people off. Now, this is the original elevation that we had on this, and you can see where we attempted to soften it, pull it down a little bit, break it back and forth, as it was shown on this one. And nope, I don't have a better shot of that. It, you know, basically, as I say, there are existing boat slips approved there, and we were looking to do a significant reduction because I do know from living on Bella Vista, I'm amazed that in 30 years that nobody has gotten that dredged out. I mean, that just is unbelievable. It seems like there is a lack of coordination on getting access to the back of the Bella Vista homes.
I think there's a significant portion of seagrass in there, and
A lot of manatees in there.
that may be why, because
It's a
like
manatee area.
behind my own house, I can't get out at low tide, and I would love to dredge it, but I've been
Well,
told
but
that.
there are people that get out of there that do chew up the seagrass or whatever's on the bottom too. I mean, you can't say that I mean, that's like saying we're going to limit everybody on Bella Vista at that end. you know, it's a sticky
But
situation.
there is a coastal wildlife concern there, that,
Oh,
that
no,
in
I
that
understand that,
particular area. In fact, one of the thoughts I had was, and I know there's constraints about where you put docks, a third in from whatever, but the further you go towards the end of that, because it dead ends,
Yeah,
the closer the docks are to that dead end, the more residents are going to be disrupted by the boat traffic. It almost,
towards the exiting end, you mean?
no, the dead end,
Oh, the dead end.
don't make people go all the way to the end.
Yeah, I live down towards that end for
Yeah,
about
so
4
I mean,
years.
I think, and I don't know how navigable that is. I mean, I look at these beautiful pictures, and I've been there in a kayak, and I'm like, no, I don't remember anything that would accommodate that.
Well, that's why we got rid of most of the motorized boat docks
Yeah.
and tried to limit what comes in and out. You know, in conversations, I have heard that they were trying to improve somewhat that access up into that waterway, but, you know, I have not been active in that.
Yeah, I don't know that there would, I think with the manatees being in there the way they are, I think that that's probably a barrier. Maybe
Well,
that's.
at one point, they have to take into account flushing. We're major marina architects also. We've done probably 15 major marinas all over the South. You go to Key West, the Galleon and the Yacht Clubs of America one at the old, out on Stock Island, that major one out there we built back in the, just before '08. I mean, flushing also is important to that access, or it's going to become an issue up in that bayou. And I think at one point, somebody's going to or think more about flushing that area out when it starts to stagnate more.
I wonder about flushing, I'm just thinking about the storm we just had.
Well, that sure
And
flushed a lot of things out.
It flushed refrigerators and all kinds of things into the bay. So there is some nature does take care of some of that.
Yeah, I'm not here to get in debate that. I mean, but I just think that there are two sides to everything, and I think at one point, if I still lived at the other end of that bayou, I would be concerned about, because, you know, I had a whale or a mako that was about a 22 or 23 footer, and I know going out of there, I had to watch when I went out. And at one point, some of the people at that end are going to feel that, well, if it starts to not flush properly, it's going to be a pretty...
So speaking about flushing and the water runoff and things, you've made me think about, in your plans, you do raise the property, I think it was 4 or 5 feet.
It's not quite 4 or 5 feet. Some parts of the property at 4.5, 5.5, they vary across the site.
So I don't know, I know for my house, we had to put in swales and we had to do things so that we just didn't have our water run off onto our neighbor's property. And I don't know, I didn't notice anything in terms of your stormwater management. I guess it would be good to see more detail about what the plan is for that, because I didn't see a lot of detail, so I don't know how any of that's going to be addressed.
Well, with 62-foot, 65-foot setbacks that are all, you know, basically, you know, unbuilt on, more or less, they're you know, we have plenty of room for the, and we have gone primarily to storm tech type systems, underground storage, and we've done that in order to try and keep the ground on a relatively reasonable basis above. So we would naturally...
That would be helpful to see, because I know, like, for the trade winds and some of the other CUPs that have gone forward, there was a lot of information provided in terms of how they were going to manage or try to manage the stormwater.
Yeah, we actually have put some thought into that, and as I said, with all the green space we really do have around us, that's not a very difficult thing to manage on this site. We do have a significant amount of area that we can put it in, that and parking lots that we can store through, and yeah.
It's like maybe 1 or 2 slides away. There's a rendering looking at the southern end of the property where you can see both pools.
Slide 146 on ours.
Oh.
Let's see if this is, yeah, there you go.
That one, yeah.
Yep.
So I found it in the CUP application on page 72. It does state there's a poolside swim-up bar, and that looks like a swim-up bar, so,
Well, it's not actually swim up. If you look at it, though, it is up out of the water. It is not, it's not one where you sit in the water. It is a pavilion on that corner. See where the stools are kind of
so that is a
out of the
bar.
water on that white concrete? Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's not a in the water bar.
So just to confirm, the quiet pool will have a bar at the pool?
It's actually a seating area. It's not a bar that serves. It's just a seating area around there. And the intent was that we have a 25 roughly seat total inside.
What prevents it from operating as a bar once it's built as depicted?
Well, I mean, we'd be glad to specify that it's not. It really is intended to be a pavilion, so I'd be glad to relabel it as a pavilion. It's not labeled as a bar, I don't believe, but I'd be glad to relabel it, and I can eliminate the counters that are out there. You know, one of the things, we can only, on a project of this scope, you can only address things as they come up, and that's never come up before, and we just never intended for it to be an outdoor bar.
Okay, yeah, the only reason I'm
glad to
asking is...
stipulate to that, you
Okay.
know.
Yeah, it was labeled that way, and I just know adults drinking at the pool all day don't tend to be quiet, so that was my concern.
I understand, but I think we can, you know, assure you that we don't intend for that to be an active bar.
Okay.
If you look at the overall plans, you'll see that there is a bar inside with seating. And I'd be glad to stipulate that there is no intention of putting an outdoor bar.
Okay.
Remember Perry mentioned the drainage, and you referenced the 65-foot setbacks, but in this picture, on the south end, it looks pretty much built out in one way or another to the edge of the property. And on the north side of the property, you have the putt-putt golf.
Yeah, and that's
So-
all grass and permeable.
So it's all permeable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me show you, though, can we go back to this photo right here? The one that's on the counter here. How do I do that? I'm technically limited in my, that's why I have a lot of young people that do all the electronic drafting and stuff.
Can we get the overhead, please?
Pardon? There you go. You can see where what we did is now we cut that back to where it's about a 40-foot landscape buffer off of the side property line, and you'll see it's mostly trees in there. We're trying to do a combination of high and low buffering to kind of limit the sound diffusion going out that direction. And I have given a copy of that to Brandon to put into the package. When we got into the discussion about this, and the first comments were brought up by staff that, it might be intruding too far into the setback, that's when we went ahead and made this modification recently to try and eliminate that issue and give you an additional 25 feet of heavily landscaped buffer.
In the February version of the narrative, there was a mention that this review requires no variances or special exceptions, but there was not a site plan at that point. Was there a change made that pushed the pool into the setbacks that required a variance, or?
No, actually, we didn't think we needed a variance for it because, pools typically have been in the setbacks in a lot of the projects going up, and we had a discussion at one point, I think staff decided that it was large enough and there was this was a little bit different, and that we ought to bring it before the board. And that was when the decision was made by staff. Correct, Brandon? On that, it was.
So we did address it after the application had been made, but it's based on how it's presented in the code. This is a commercial use, but the standards in the code are for residential pools, but we did err on the side of caution with this one, so.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's why we modified it to come before you with
So
it
is that compressing the pool, or is it just shifting
It's
it in?
compressing it, yeah. We don't intend for this to be like the one up in, what do you call it? Do we want it to be an attraction? Yeah, I'm not going to tell you we didn't. And that's why, like, when it attracted the Sports Illustrated people, I've got the brochure in the office. You want to see jazz. They were like, all kind of sports activities in the setbacks and all that. Talk about noise, it would have been tremendous. But it was just too flashy and too much, not in the direction we wanted to go. We really wanted to create a family-orientated project that gave people some place to take the kids after the third day on the beach and do something besides just walk across the street to the beach, and, you know. And also, we felt like the preservation of the walkway around the thing, yeah, it doesn't seem like much, but how many developers do you have come in and dedicate a walkway around their property to try and preserve an element of, you know, not cutting the public off? Sorry, you want to come through the hotel and pay a fee. I think that we tried to be a little more thoughtful on this and make it make a certain amount of trying to really make it a family-orientated thing.
Sir,
I think.
sir, can I just ask you a question really quick?
Pardon me?
I just want to, before we get too far away, you had made a comment that this is going to be a condo hotel. What does that mean for the number of expected occupants per room?
Well, what it does is it creates, for example, Marriott has a program that we're working under and already on, and Marriott has already, about a year ago when we first started this, they had a tentative, their local representative who happened to have bought a condo from me. He came down and looked at this, and he had approved it as a Marriott, potential Marriott site. And the condo hotel business is, we sell the units to individuals who buy them as investments. They put them into the rental program with either Marriott or one of the major components of marketing, and it generates income to them. For example, on some of the ones we've done a ton of development, as I said, over the years, and some of the ones that we've done in the beach communities here generate a tremendous return because they're first-class facilities, and we try to do them with you know, enough attraction on site that there's more of a reason to go than just to be sitting in the hotel room and, you know, look out over the water, but not have a lot of activity on the site. We're trying to really make this into a resort. It's a quality resort.
So do people buy these units, or is it more like a timeshare?
Nope, they buy them.
They buy
One
'em?
owner, yeah, one owner buys them.
Okay, so then there has to be the condo association and all those.
It has a condo association that requires, you know, that manages the property properly. And
So, I'm sorry, I don't think you answered my question, though. I
Yes.
asked how many occupants are you expecting how many occupants would each unit accommodate, I guess is the question. What is it's 2 bedrooms?
Can I ask a question a different way? I think
Yeah.
you have, you're asking for 104 temporary lodging units. You mentioned that each unit is a 2-bedroom unit.
They're
Is
all
that
2-bedroom, yeah.
208 bedrooms?
It's 208 bedrooms. Yeah, it's a family project. It's not a we set this up to be a family project where we have come with kids.
So, and then in condo hotels that I've experienced in the past, the owner is responsible for the furniture within the unit?
No.
Okay. Will there be a living room in the unit?
There's a seat, yeah, there's a living room in the
So
middle.
there'll be a pull-out bed?
There potentially could be, yeah.
Okay. So technically, we could have up to
Maybe
312 beds.
Yeah, you could.
You
but
could.
That's pushing it a bit, yeah.
I mean, that's,
Yeah, typically the ones that we've done have had maybe a pair of bunk beds and not a pull-out in the living room, and we've had
but there's nothing that stops you from doing that.
technically, there's not, but it's the same way in a hotel, you know, any hotel you have, they can put a pull-out bed in it.
I'm sorry, I didn't know if that answered your question better, but I
Yeah.
think that was the
I
direction
mean,
you were
they're
going?
potentially, but they are tightly managed. They're not run like where you come in and put your own furniture and you stay there whenever you want. You don't, your use of the units are very limited. You have to have them in the rental program, and they're managed very well.
Any of the rooms big enough to fit 2 queen beds in?
Pardon me?
Are any of the rooms big enough to fit 2 queen beds in?
No, I don't think so.
But if you have a pair of bunks, that's 4
Well, I
in
mean,
one
you got-
room.
Brandon, I saw in this application, there was a statement that even if you are an owner of a unit, you cannot stay a cumulative 30-plus days per year. Is that accurate?
That's correct. That's across 1 year, and that would be a requirement of just the land development code, basically.
And that's pretty standard for a condo hotel.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you're right. It's you know, the better condo hotels are run properly. The ones where they allow people to you know, kind of wink and say, well, yeah, you know, if you stay an extra couple weeks or a month, you know, but we, you know, we deal with some pretty professional management.
Is the owner required to use your property management, or can they go into? Okay.
Yes. One of the reasons that some of the condo hotels up in Clearwater are Marriott related, for example, and they are positive because you really have professional management that's no loopholes. The negative is you get people that don't want to buy in there because they want to kind of, oh, well, we want to stay 3-4 months a year, you know, and use it as almost a residential. We you know, you got to keep control of these, and you got to have professional management, and we would be, you know, trying to make sure that we were either in a Marriott purview or a similar type management. You know, I think what we're asking today is, yes, we are trying to be attentive to the details that have taken into account the Bella Vista issue. There are a lot of things that could be built there that would be noisy too. It's a commercial property. I'm not sure that this isn't really, I strongly believe this is a really relative use that offers a compromise that has an element of control in it, and I think that that we would do a professional job and see to it that the property was properly handled.
Sir, can I ask a question about the site plan and the docks?
Yeah.
So are they distributed across the site, or are they?
Well, you can kind
accurate
of see
is
they're
the-
spread, they're in two clusters, you can see right there. It's basically two, you can maybe consider that a third cluster down the end. As I said, there are technically the lease for the, I think it's 32 docks is still in place and being paid on. There were 30-something docks there that have all fallen into disrepair. You can see the pilings down in the water. You know, the site's long past due to be developed.
But there are docks down or closer to that end where it really narrows on that bayou and goes towards the end. Okay. I also wanted to ask, I think I had asked Brandon, so there was a staff comment about the fountain and coming out of a drought period and talking about water-saving technology and techniques such as splash and rain. And so I'd really like to understand the water consumption of this feature pool and the impacts of that on you know.
You know, to be honest with you, I mean, the water consumption I was not prepared to address. I mean, we've done some water park work in the past. There is not an unusual consumption above what a pool is except for the fact that when you do have moving water, it does tend to evaporate a little quicker. But I don't think it's substantial. And all the ones that I've been, you know, peripherally involved in as the architect, I've never seen any real attention given to the fact that it took excessive amounts of water. Oops, sorry about that.
It is a concern, again, just because of that water's going somewhere, and
Turn that
it's
off.
a lot of jumping kids. So we just want to have some sort of idea of what that would, the impacts of that would be into our systems.
When Hotel Zamora was built, the units were built with lock-offs where there could be divided into 2 units. Are any of those?
No intention of doing lockouts. You know, lockouts. I get clients occasionally that think they can get away with that. I don't really ever. I don't do projects where people intend to cheat on what they're doing. You know, and as I said, we've done 4,000 plus units of our own throughout the state, and you know, you'll hear about condo developers having issues. We've never had a lawsuit on a project, and we stick by the rules.
Are all the units identical?
They're not quite. They're a percentage of them are 1-bedroom. I forgot the numbers are in the plans, but there are a number of I would guesstimate about 25% are 1-bedroom, 75% are the 2-bedroom. The 2-bedroom is the most desirable. I mean, everybody wants, you know, wants something they can bring a family into.
Approximate square footage of the units?
They're exactly 750 square feet. You know, I know this, I did, as you know, we've been through a few hearings and the neighborhood meetings with the Bella Vista people, and I understand their issues, and I think we've tried to take them into account absolutely as best we could, up to and including this recent site plan revision to try and keep it all within, tucked behind the main building. But we've tried not to ask for any variances, or we're not requesting any real variances. We stayed within the height limits. The height, by the way, was the reason we had to go to the maximum height is because of these huge setbacks and the shape of the site. If it was a square like this desk, it would have been great. We could have stacked units, front to back as well. We have no choice but to go sideline to side, side property line to side property line. It's the nature of the site. And, we've discussed with people breaking the site up to overcome the side setbacks, and it's just not there are so few sites of this size that are left, and, so we tried to do as responsible of a job as we could.
Sir, what is the, it might be in here and I just didn't see it, the seawall height?
The seawall heights, typically, right now, they're approving them right around 5 and 5.5 above, the thought process may be varying on that, but they're approving them at 5 to 5.5. I've lately heard some at 6. Brandon, do you know what they're?
Minimum still 5 feet. That might be reevaluated in the future, but for now, that's the minimum.
But what are we, understand the minimum. The city's intent going forward is to increase that. Would we ask this developer as part of that to consider increasing the seawall to meet our sustainability?
We certainly could. One of the things that we have to consider with that is going to be the impact on adjacent properties. Certainly, if they have a seawall of less than 5 feet currently, if they were to go to a higher standard, we wouldn't want there to be any additional impacts to them, but it's something we could explore.
Considering they have this, what they're considering a very large setback on both sides for drainage, though, I would assume that would help mitigate any impacts to neighboring.
I agree.
If we don't start somewhere in increasing seawall heights, then we just won't get that.
I've been amazed at how the cities have overlooked seawall heights. I mean, way back when we did Beach Cottage up in what's that, in Indian Shores, we uncovered a wood seawall out there that was from the, God knows when, the turn of the century, who knows. But at that time, you had to put seawalls on the Gulf side. They would encourage you to put. Then suddenly, as it got into the 70s, they started to discourage that. I mean, to me, on the intercoastal side, I would think that you'd want to go to 6 feet, but then you got to figure out how you accommodate everybody that's adjacent and how it all works. But I think that we'd be glad to go to whatever height we could go that would not impede the properties adjacent to us.
Thank you.
Glad to answer any other questions you have.
Could we go back to my question on MBT management? Who's going to operate this property as a hotel condo?
Well, we have professional management we work with on 2 other projects, they both manage in excess of 1,000 units along the beaches. When we talked to Marriott originally, Marriott wants to come in. If you do a Marriott project, they want to. They're naturally, there's no question they want to manage it. The reason that the Marriott is a little, it limits some of your sales, which is fine with us. It limits it because they really, as you mentioned, no nonsense. You either go by the rules. There's no lockout units. There's no, the owner can stay for 3 months and we'll kind of wink at it. You want to go with a management company like the 2 that we use out here on the beach for years. We've been using them for 20-something years. I think you want to stick with a professional. We passed on the what do you call it, the Sports Illustrated thing, because they are getting ready to do one in Clearwater. To me, that is a conflict with neighborhoods around you. It's outdoor sports and it's a lot of outdoor, noise potentially.
So would SunGold remain the owner of the core property? We've got SunGold would remain the owner?
No, it will not. We're going to transfer. We actually had a commitment back when we kind of got put off a couple times on being able to move ahead, and it wasn't a big deal. I mean, we, you know, at the time, they had 2 major projects going through, and we were delayed from coming in. We actually had an offer from a management team to bring in as a partner in the deal, California, what do you call it, like not a teacher's fund, but a fund, that, you know, a retirement fund that, you know, was looking for an investment to finance the deal with us. And, you know, we still have a lot of options out there.
So SunGold would see the development through to completion?
SunGold will transfer the property and be out of it.
After completion?
No, prior to, before we start construction.
Because some of the asks in this application are not transferable, as far as I understand. Is that accurate?
Well, I mean, I don't think that's the case. I mean, you can't do it, you know, you have to form a separate shell to build this thing. You can't do it in
But this application is in the name of SunGold, as far as I can tell.
That's who we have the contract with, yes.
Okay, so,
Purchase. And we had to get their sign on for us to go ahead with it.
I thought there was a thing in the CUP that if the ownership changed, it had to be resubmitted or something. Brandon, you...
Right, so development rights, unless specified otherwise, usually run with the land. However, in the case that we do have these 20 criteria for the conditional use, and one of them is specific to the financial and technical capacity of the developer to complete the project, and that would be the agent who's currently requesting this project. They would be the ones performing the development services under the assumption that that criteria is met. But the ownership is not really, it would transfer because the unit owners would change. There would be a management that took over different aspects of the parcel, so that would not be limited as far as I'm aware.
does that apply to the units assigned from the pool as well?
It would be assigned to the development project, to
Okay.
the parcels, so it would be, you know, they would not be transferable to a new project without reconsideration.
Okay.
In other words, you have to stay with what you've got, but the land, the zoning goes with the land, and, you know, we have to naturally put it in a separate shell in order to handle the whole
Okay.
transaction, you know.
Sir, on the site plan for the, I think they called it a loading zone. I know in most of the other developments, they are encouraging like a drive-through for drop-offs, for free beach ride, et cetera. It looks like in your site development plan, a free beach ride would need to enter into the property, do some sort of turnaround and come out. For anybody who's lived on the beach, we know that doesn't happen. They're gonna just stop at the curb and drop people out. They're not gonna take the time to go into a development and turn around and get stuck in with guest traffic unless there is some sort of drive-through. Is there a way that can be addressed?
Well, if you look at the parking layouts, the only one to the left where the thing is the only one that's a dead end. The other one loops underneath the building. It doesn't.
That's a long loop. I mean, a free beach ride, an Uber, a Lyft is not gonna go through and get stuck in with your guest traffic. They're
Well,
just-
everything else a few of the other hotels that we've done have been purely valet management of the spots. The only place that I could think, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know how you solve that with a property that's as long as this thing is. A loop is pretty impractical. It's really very difficult to do.
I think.
But, you know, the valet is a major factor in most of the beach hotels now that we do. In fact, you know, the Miramar is going to be all valet, 24 hours, everything. The Cambria that we did, 24-hour valet. Valet has a much better control over the parking elements and avoids issues. And you know, when we first did it at Cambria, I thought that was a little bit much, but it's worked out well. And Mr. Bowden, that we're doing both of those hotels with, and another two, he has stuck to the rules on that all the way through.
And I believe as part of the conditional use permits for both the Serrata and the Trade Winds, that was a requirement, was it not?
And we'd asked for one with this as well. Staff saw some opportunity in the front of the arcade building to possibly have a loop for drop-off, as well as expand that green space buffer at the front there. It is a little bit narrow, or shallow rather, and the site is considerably over its parking minimum, so that would, you know, I think that's where we proposed it, but we could work with them if that's what the board would like.
I think to follow on that, there was also a question about having a loading dock, because the way things would be dropped off for, you know, services was also a point of concern for some of the residents.
We have a loading elevator, a service elevator, and a loading dock under the building, yeah, that is close to all the facilities that would require, like the restaurant and the laundry in that area. There are.
Can you show us where on the map the garbage collection will occur?
I'm sorry, where the what?
Where trash collection will occur?
Well, trash collection is,
Can we get the overhead?
okay, let me get back to. Trash collection occurs, whoops, let me get to the site plan that shows the, that's going the wrong way, okay. Okay. I just saw it on here a minute ago, now I'm. Level 4, and I don't see levels. Oh. Nope. We gotta get back to the beginning of this to. I could show you where. Let me see if it's here. Hold on. It is right up in the front area. When you see that big space off to the right when you come in the main entry there?
To the right of drainage easement?
Right, yeah, just
Okay.
to the right of the entry.
Mhm.
Those are, see how those are oversized spaces? The trash collection is right in that area.
Okay.
So it's right, easy access. They can back out and come back out to the street.
Okay.
Brenda, I think it's a question for you, but since this is a condo hotel, and if the owner is occupying at time of hurricane watch, are they subject to the same rules of they will vacate the premises at hurricane watch as part of the evacuation, regardless of the fact that they're the owner of the unit?
So part of the limitation in the code is that all temporary lodging uses, as long as they're properly registered, are treated the same. So this would not be treated any differently from the other developments with the same condition.
So it will be regardless vacated at hurricane watch.
Correct. Yes.
Any other questions? I'd be glad to.
So at this point, we don't have a good view of traffic impact because there's not a TMP at this point, and there's also a concern that the ITU guide that's used to establish trips doesn't include several of the uses for this property. So we really don't have a good idea at this point what traffic impact this will have.
Well, we didn't know that we had to have it prior to this. We had discussed with Brandon and the staff that we were going to have the traffic study, done as soon as we had, some of the details worked out, so we knew what we were dealing with.
If I can piggyback on that, David, I think doing some basic math, they're talking about 600 people potentially every day wanting to walk over to the beach. And that side of Gulf Boulevard, I mean, I know all of us who drive through there know how dangerous Gulf Boulevard is. Unfortunately, the tourists don't know, but that's a lot of people crossing the street, walking to an easement, and then having to walk. Well, basically the whole thing to get to the county park is about, what is it, a half a mile? And I just can't see parents with children and their paraphernalia, You know, unless you've got an arrangement with some of the condos or things along the beach that you can use their beachfront also, it's quite a hike.
And I believe that only addresses people staying there. So if there's more people coming for the putt-putt golf, the watercraft, or the pools, I think that increases that. So
I think 600 people a day is heavy occupancy. We don't experience that. I mean, it's more typically, you know, a family with 1 or 2
But
kids.
you said two twin beds in 1 bedroom, so that's 4 kids or 4
What's usually
bodies.
bunk beds, or, yeah, so it's
Yeah.
2 kids in
Okay,
1 bedroom, and then
or
parents
4,
in the other.
right? Isn't a bunk bed 2? So is it two bunk beds or?
No, it's 1 bunk bed.
One
yeah,
bed,
or
okay.
2 single, you know.
Single,
so-
okay, I misunderstood, I thought you were saying.
No, I
2.
mean, the typical load that we typically get in most of the condo hotels is in the 3 to 4 occupants. You know,
Per room.
usually it's, especially these being family-oriented, it's going to be parents and 1 or 2 or kids, maybe, I mean, there's some, they're going to be 3, some, you know, but I think that it's, you know, we're trying to put enough facilities on site that we keep them there and keep their attention most of the time. As I said in the beginning of my presentation, I think after the 2nd or 3rd day on the beach, they're kind of looking for some place to go or something else to do. And I think we're trying to provide as much activity on the site. And that's why we tried to make use somewhat of our setbacks, our extensive setbacks, given the narrowness of this. I think you have to take into consideration when you're looking at a site, how well it handled the setbacks and the limitations that it has on it. And this site's an extremely limited site with these huge setbacks, and at the narrowest point coming down to like 45 feet in depth. It was a pretty creative task to try and make this work. So I think we tried to make it, you know, the best resort facility that we could with as much attraction on it as we could, and best make use of the setbacks and do something with them other than just plant them and, you know, or concrete them or put parking in them. We could have parked. It could have been 2 big parking lots at both ends. We decided not to do that, and we didn't want to do that. That's a bad option. To me, that's a worse option than, you talk about lights going across the highway. I'd rather have them in parking garages and under buildings than 2 big parking lots out in those 60-some foot. That's actually the width, by coincidence, of a double-sided parking lot on both ends of the property. I didn't want to put parking lots there. And we could have saved on the parking garage, but that was part of what drove our. And I do understand your concerns, but I do think that we're trying to do a responsible job, and we've come up with what I think is a pretty good option on our request. I appreciate your consideration.
Well, I have just, to Member Perry's point about the distance, so the draw on Free Beach Ride, both from the guests trying to get to the beach, probably to that, you know, parking lot, and then guests from other hotels trying to get to the amenity of your resort, if approved. That looks like a big draw on the freebie, potentially. So what is the city's thought, or sir, maybe your thought on support to that, to the Free Beach Ride from the developer or the resident and over an enduring period? And how can we codify that if we don't know who the owner of the property is, to say there will be X amount of contribution to the freebie over an enduring period of so many years to support this project?
So we typically include those as certificate of occupancy conditions, so it would be something before the resort were able to operate. There needs to be payments or contributions, whatever it ends up being. That has been proposed as part of the transportation management plan. I don't want to speak for the applicant yet because I understand they're undertaking a traffic study where that's typically included.
We have a firm engaged to do the study whenever we're, you know, but as we had discussed, we're not, you know, it wasn't a requirement prior to this meeting. And as far as knowing who the developer is, we're engaged and have been engaged as the principal developers in so many projects that we really don't need anybody else. We're doing a $22 million development right now, approved, ready to go under construction, you know, on Treasure Island. I mean, you know, so we're not new to this. I mean, we've done 4,000 units that we were the developer on all over the state, hotels, condo hotels, you know, condos, virtually everything you can imagine we've done since 1968. when I first graduated. That's what I started in the business on. Didn't come from a wealthy family, just got out and borrowed $5,000 and, believe it or not, built a 205-unit apartment complex in Jacksonville. So that was a heck of a run at it right out of college. But we've done, my financial, the people that finance most of my stuff, we've had commitments on this already. So I'm not worried about bringing anybody in.
I know the traffic study talks about peak travel hours to and from. Can we ensure that the traffic study includes the potential load on our Freebrook Beach ride? Is that possible? Because how would we assess what the fee contribution over an enduring period would be if we don't have that, or are we going to make some sort of assumption to do that, some sort of call on historical data or some other way to look at that?
I think that's something staff could potentially estimate based on our ridership numbers. It's going to vary. I believe it varies based on location. Certain areas are more likely to use the service than others, but we could provide some kind of an estimate if the board would like to carry that forward.
If the traffic study's completed, essentially what it's going to do is provide a condition for us to ask for additional things for them. In the event that they're agreeing to provide those things, it really doesn't give us a deciding factor of whether or not we want to move forward with this project. So, or the planning board would make a decision on moving forward with the project. If that study came back, all we're doing is making an adjustment to the conditions that Brendan or the city would ask for. I don't know if that's a deciding factor for me in regards to this.
I don't think the traffic study's addressing what I'm specifically concerned about, which is the draw on the existing city's contract with Free.
Sure.
Again, just
It's too far to walk.
location, they're not on the beach, so those families aren't just going to walk out the back door off the property onto the beach. They may, if they especially are they're family oriented and they've got kids and stuff, they're going to need that service to get them to an access point to the beach, probably the county parking lot. And again, people coming from those other hotels to this resort to play mini golf or use the arcade, So my concern is that we're placing a demand on a limited capacity without asking for compensation for that.
But to me, even if they were willing to compensate us, look, I believe this is a beautiful project, right? But I think it's overdeveloped. I think we're trying to put way too much stuff into way too small of a spot, okay? And I think that and I understand your numbers and the lock-off and the things of that sort, but when you're looking at 104 units with the potential of 312 beds, right, that could potentially support up to 600 people. I understand that's 100% occupancy. That doesn't happen all the time. But you know what? We've had the Super Bowl here. We've had other events where those times are met and the occupancy rates are at 100%, right? People are renting out their condos when they're not supposed to be, or their houses when they're not supposed to be. We know that happens. I just think this project is overdeveloped. It's a beautiful project. It's a place I would want to stay, but it's not a place I would want on St. Pete Beach. And I don't believe that it meets what the city's looking for.
Yeah, and expanding on Member Grocot's concern, if the closest beach access is Miramar, and after our Miramar hearing, we don't even know if that beach access will be viable because it's covered with a dune that might not be passable or removable. That moves the closest beach access even further. So we're going to have people jaywalking, trying to go through Undertow, who in years past has had to put up a fence to keep people from passing through because they were tired of people traversing their bar to get to the beach. So they're going to move on down to Beach House Suites and cut through their parking lot. And I'm just worried that quantity of people trying to cross Gulf Boulevard to find a random entrance to the beach.
I think it's a public safety issue.
Yeah.
I do.
There's also the 37th Street access, which is a lawsuit with the Zamora right now, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with you. I feel like this is a beautiful project, but I feel it's out of character. I don't think it meets the comprehensive plan or the land development codes. it just is, it's supposed to be a transition between residential and commercial, and it's not a transition. So I feel like it's too much. It's too much right there.
It's the placing of a resort in a non-resort district, like a full-service, everything resort.
I live directly across the water from this subject area, and I'm concerned about the boat traffic too, because the Zamora brings a lot of boat traffic, and a lot of people don't adhere to the no wake signs. Some of them sunk in the storm and haven't been replaced, so we've had problems with that. And it's so shallow and trepidatious there.
It's very
Yeah,
shallow.
visitors don't know how to
I've
navigate.
had kayakers come on my dock and hang out. So I don't know that the waterfront aspect is ideal for the residents of Bella Vista.
It's the waterfront there is not really resort waterfront.
Yeah.
And it's just a little,
No, and to your point, on top of that, I mean, you've got 5 stories of balconies overlooking that with potentially 6, again, at max capacity, 6 persons per room. I understand they're going to try to control the noise from the amplified, which is, the public amplification, but again, it will be very difficult to control that noise coming off of rooms and balconies on a regular basis. And again, I think you also have to think of the cumulative noise of the development. It's not just this rooftop bar, that rooftop, it's. So I have concerns for the
Yeah.
residents of Bella Vista and specifically meeting the intent of.
and this on Sierra and,
Yeah,
with-
yes, when you're talking about levels of balconies with multiple occupants per room, that gives me great pause.
it's a great project, it's just in the wrong place.
I think consolidation in that area is not ideal. I think that's the kind of area where you would want the smaller boutique hotels that are further up on the bayou in Bella Vista, and then restaurants, and kind of separate them instead of having this large resort.
Again, I understand the importance of economics, right? Making this make financial sense, but I mean, it's not our responsibility to determine an investor's or a developer's financial perspective on it, right? It's our responsibility for sensible development within the city. And, oh, man, I guess based off of that, I would like to make a motion to deny.
Do I have a second?
If we could take public comment.
Oh, we have to
Oh.
take public comment.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Did we get a
Okay.
second?
Any public comment?
You can fill it out after and give it to me, thank you.
Please state your name and address.
Yes, it's Russ Mazziarka, 3820 Gulf Boulevard, apartment 701. Been there for 11 years now, and I can send you pictures from just Saturday. We heard the whole bridal party speech from the top of the Zamora. We had, just a week ago, I can show you it, and I sent it to the commissioners and mayor, a video again of how loud that can be. And that's 11 years of the Zamora's been there for, I think, 10 years now. And that 10 years, they have not gotten quiet. They have not met code enforcement. What makes us think this project will do the same? I think the noise is just going to be too much. I understand development, it has to happen, even the height, it would bother me, but I understand it. But the noise that would come out of that building, I think, would be very detrimental to life and the lifestyle we want to lead down here. So, right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comment?
Do I need to make a motion again, or are we good?
Can I just clarify, is the motion to recommend disapproval to the commission?
Yeah, is that, yeah.
Correct, yeah.
Would need to be.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure I understood it properly. Thank you.
Do you still need a second?
So this would be a motion to recommend denial of Resolution 2024-12?
That is correct.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Can I please have a roll call?
Vice Chair Angelides,
So, yes,
you're agreeing with,
I
or
agree.
disagreeing with the motion, which is?
I agree with the motion, yes.
Member Grocott,
Yes, I agree.
Member Ray,
Yes.
Member Perry,
Yes.
Chair Hubbard,
Yes.
motion carries.
And then there'd be another one for,
So do we need to do the same recommendation for ordinance 24-08,
Does it apply at this
or
point?
does it become null and void?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Do we need to make a motion for the same on ordinance 2024-08? Or does it become null and void from,
Because this is a recommending body, I'd recommend that you make a motion on both.
I make a motion to recommend denial to the city commission for 24.
ordinance 2024-08?
Correct.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second?
Roll call, please.
Member Grocott?
Yes.
Member Ray?
Yes.
Member Perry?
Yes.
Vice Chair Angelides?
Yes.
Member Hubbard?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And we are on 4C. This is a recommendation of ordinance 2024-18. Is this you, Brandon? Or-
It is.
Okay.
Can we do an intermission?
Yeah. Let's do a 10-minute bio break.
Sounds good.
Thank you. And we are on to 4C, the ordinance 2024-18.
Sure, so just a quick summary of this. I don't have a presentation for it. This item was adopted last month by the City Commission as an emergency ordinance. It has gone through its first reading. Unfortunately, we couldn't time up the first reading with the planning board meeting, but it'll be going back in January, middle of January, for permanent adoption, which would allow for the turnover of the emergency ordinance to the permanent ordinance. And all this does is activate the ability for substantial improvement exceptions for historic buildings in our city to be administratively approved and applied as allowed by the definition of substantial improvement in the National Flood Insurance Program. Currently, the city's process requires a substantial improvement variance, which is actually a public hearing. They go to the Historic Preservation Board. It's a much more time-consuming and arduous process than a substantial improvement exception, which is just checking that the structure is on the historic registry. It's not going to be precluded from remaining historic, and then approving that through a building permit. So we've come up with a two-part process. I have run this by both the state certified local government. They handle the Historic Preservation Board certification of our program, as well as our Florida Department of Emergency and Management reviewer who reviews our floodplain management ordinances. So I've run it by both of them, and for anything substantial that affects the exterior of the structure, that would still need to go through the substantial improvement variance process that would go forward to the Historic Preservation Board. That's to ensure that we are still evaluating these structures if there are major additions, major facade changes, things like that, that could actually alter the historic integrity of the parcel. Those would be taken forward for review. This would be only for interior repairs or minor exterior repairs that are one-for-one replacement of materials. It wouldn't be complete roof change-outs, shingle to metal roof. It would be only the replacement of shingles on the exterior, for example, and substantial interior repairs to the structure. It would just be a more straightforward process, especially with residences. We never look at the inside of the structure when it comes to making a determination if it's historic or not. It really has more to do with the outside of the structure. So this is just a more efficient way for people to get back into their homes when they qualify for that exception. And we hope that you can make a recommendation on this ordinance.
So this is effectively already active as an emergency ordinance?
Yes.
Okay.
And the recommendation that we make would be for approval by the city council.
Yes, please.
Do we need discussion?
Has the Historic Preservation Board reviewed this emergency ordinance? They're okay with as written?
They have. They recommended the emergency ordinance to the commission. Yes.
Yeah, I don't have any concerns with
Yeah.
I'll make a motion for recommendation for approval of ordinance 2024-18.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Member Grocott?
Yes.
Member Ray?
Yes.
Member Perry?
Yes.
Vice Chair Angelides?
Yes.
Chair Hubbard?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, we are on to item 5A, continued discussion of artificial turf.
So thank you to members for sending me your summaries and your spreadsheets showing what your preferences were for a potential future ordinance. If we could get the PowerPoint pulled up, please. If we could get the presentation loaded, please. Well, we can start talking about it while it gets pulled up. So I had received content from members in different formats. Some had highlighted preferences in the spreadsheet. Some had sent summaries. Especially with the summaries, I think there were items that are consistent with some of the other recommendations that the members made, but I just wanted to run a few things by you at the start. So in terms of items that I believe that all members appeared to have consensus on, those were that permits must be submitted when turf is installed. There need to be product specifications included. They need to demonstrate that the turf is of high quality. It has porous material. I believe all the members selected that you wanted it to emulate the look of natural grass with an 8-year no-fade warranty. Get back to this on the presentation. You'd be looking at things like making sure that the grass has individual blades, 1.5-inch pile at a minimum. Again, it would be porous material. This is something that the board had asked that I look into, both the subsurface as well as the material itself. Other cities appear to recommend around 10 inches an hour in terms of permeability. That was Tampa. I believe a few other cities had in that 10-inch per hour range. I'd have a no-fade warranty. 8+ years seemed to be the consensus. I assume that's probably a standard manufacturing warranty. So it appeared to be 8+ years in multiple codes, and disposable at any U.S. landfill if that is viable. There seemed to be consensus that turf needs to be installed per manufacturer specifications and anchored, and it must be separated from natural landscaping areas through a bumper, a most strip, or similar. Do any of the members have any issues with that? Was there general consensus on those items?
Yeah, I was in agreement with all of that. Yeah.
So one major item that I don't know that there was inconsistencies on, it was addressed differently in the items that the planning board had sent over, was whether the turf with a properly porous subgrade would be allowed to count toward a lot's permeability ratio. So looking at the most strict down to the most lenient, Orlando's code specifically states it's the intent for vegetative material to comprise the pervious area of the lot. If a lot requires 40% permeability, 40% of the lot needs to be vegetative surface. Turf is considered impervious. It's specifically laid out in their code. St. Pete Beach, of course, doesn't have all of the product specification standards that other communities have, but it does specify that 80% of the required permeable area must be vegetative material. 20% can be comprised of a combination of turf, permeable pavers, gravels, and so on. So those aren't additive. If someone uses their 20% for permeable pavers, they can't use it for turf. 24% of most residential lots need to be maintained as vegetative surface, but we do allow that 20% to be comprised of other material. Tampa states that turf can be considered permeable if it meets specifications for materials, has a reservoir with 4-inch plus stone, uncompacted soils, and adequate aggregate. Appears to also require a certain percentage of green space in residential lots, but it's not spelled out through their artificial turf ordinance. You can see here, this is part of their permitting packet. On the right side of the screen, they have the applicants lay out what portion of the lot is comprised of turf, what is comprised of vegetative surface, and what is comprised of impermeable material. So I was hoping to get some consensus from the board on whether you would like for turf to always be considered impervious, if you'd like some fraction of it to potentially count toward the permeable portion of the lot, or whether you would just like to allow it to be considered up to 100% permeable if it meets those specifications for permeability.
So the opinion I expressed to Brandon in email was I liked the idea of supporting both concepts based on whether or not the underlayment and the turf itself allowed whatever the city experts decided was a sufficient amount of water permeability per hour. And if you don't do that underlayment, or you don't have the turf that meets those requirements, then it's impermeable. But I wasn't opposed to all of the permeable portion of a lot using turf if it meets those requirements.
So on permitting then, following that train of thought, so then when they put in the permit, they'll have to say this is what we're going to do. We're going to have the 10, did you say 10 inches per hour or something?
Yeah, so we.
And then when they come out and inspect, I'm sorry to cut you off, and then when they come out to inspect, they'll inspect that, and if it doesn't have the right subgrade, then they'd have to pull it out back to basically what would be the second restrictive level? Is that how that would work then?
Yeah, I think they would, I mean, ideally they would present to the city the make and model of turf they want to use beforehand, and then the city would know we're going out there expecting to see this specific turf on top of this underlayment, and if it doesn't meet those requirements, then fail, try again.
But then they check it on, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel that it should be considered not permeable. Some of these workarounds address some of the issues with it, but there are many other issues, and I know they come up later, like the fact it's a heat sink, the fact that There's no ecological life in it. I mean, basically, you've destroyed a lot of the food for the birds. There's no insects, or so in even some of the bacterial growth and things that normally make soil healthy and help with runoff and things, all those things are taken away. So, and I think I might have been the only one that said it shouldn't be near the water. I mean, some of them said keep it so many feet away from the water. And these things are made with chemicals. They're hydrocarbons. I mean, there's no getting around it. And I just think it's a very unhealthy thing. We put so many barriers into our wildlife that I just feel it should be kept away from the water. It should be considered impermeable. I mean, I understand. My husband and I were talking about doing it in our front yard. We thought, oh gosh, it'll be so great. And as I started reading all the materials that you provided, I was like, oh my goodness, we shouldn't allow this at all. This is terrible. So,
following on, I mean, if we took worst case scenarios, like every lot had artificial turf and it was considered impervious, and then we talk about the heat factors that the study that the university provided, that Brandon provided, talked about, like how much hotter that is. And then we talk about the issues with red tide and sea levels and things like that. So I think there is larger, to your point, larger ecological.
Yeah, this is one issue, yeah.
Considerations, because I think we always have to think, like, what if everybody went to the furthest extent that we allow them to go? What does that do to our waterways? What does that do to our, ecosystems?
I think if we were to do some kind of, can't do it within 50 feet of the water in a place that has so much waterfront housing, we might as well not allow it, because otherwise,
I think 50 feet is extensive.
I think
That's the size of the lots.
that's too many, so maybe.
Where are the majority of
front
the,
yards of waterfront homes could be a alternative to that.
where are the majority of the people using it? Are they using it in the backyard? Are they using it in a front yard?
Typically, when we see requests for turf to be placed, it is the majority, if not the entire lot. That is just what's brought forward to us for a request.
Mhm.
Most, many homeowners don't know that they need to bring these requests forward, but it tends to be the whole lot or near to that. We see it frequently with new homes going in. We'll receive a landscaping plan that shows the entire lot comprised of turf, and then we'll walk it back. We'll work with them, but we're not currently evaluating on-site placement. We're just looking to make sure that they have the minimum vegetation.
So, when you say the entire lot, are they leaving cutouts for trees and shrubs, or?
Yes,
Okay.
right. They still meet the tree minimum, but most residential properties in the city, we're looking at ground cover and trees only. We don't have, hedge requirements or shrubs or anything like that, so.
So I think it would be difficult to call a permeable surface impermeable. So I don't know if we can do that. I think the way that you would address it would be by restricting the amount of area that they could cover. But when you go down to like the 80-20 number, right? If you go down to what's the size of some of these lots are 10,000 feet, 12,000 square feet. So you're looking at 240, is that right? 12,000 times, 2,400 square feet.
That would be 2,400 square feet of required vegetation based on the current code. And of that 30%, so a 10,000 square foot lot, 600 square feet of that could be artificial turf. Now, that's not, if someone has impermeable space that has not been utilized, so if they, based on the current code, if the driveway and the house and the pool and everything else comprises 60% of the lot area, based on the current code, they could have 16% because they have that 10% difference in impermeability plus 6 additional % for the turf. So it could be addressed differently if the board would like, just based on a total amount on the lot or a distance from the seawall, which addresses a certain percentage of the lot to begin with. It really comes down to the board, how the board would like to phrase that.
But that only addresses homes that are on the water. So everyone else can then go to town with the, so I don't necessarily think that.
I like the 80-20 rule for that. and then parlay that with if it is impervious, or if they want to just say, okay, it's going to be impervious, or have it meet the requirements of permeability, and then stick with the 80-20 rule.
I really didn't care until you brought up the ecological impact that it has, because I really didn't consider that. I personally do not care to mow the lawn, right? I was thinking, oh man, this would be nice. But when you take those other things into consideration, I think minimizing it, not eliminating it, but minimizing it. And I agree. I like the 80-20.
Now, in contrast, Member Perry is familiar with my house because we live a few doors down from each other, but I have a natural beach behind my house that seems to collect everyone's lawn trimmings, and so we're talking every high tide, hundreds of pounds of mowing that ends up on our beach, and yards also come with endless application of fertilizer and pest control materials, and that all ends up running off into the water as well. So I'm not as opposed to turf, but you know, if the majority of you are opposed to it, I would be happy maintaining 80-20 and calling it impermeable, and that seems to solve most of the problems.
Because I think you still need to use, you don't need to, there's other ways to mitigate weeds, but if you've seen people that have it that don't treat it, then the weeds are coming up through the through the turf. So I don't think it necessarily eliminates the runoff of chemicals. And again, I'm always concerned about the invisible, whatever they are, the microplastics.
The microbes.
Oh,
Yeah.
For sure.
So I'd like to see it stay at a 80-20.
And then do we want some kind of waterfront stipulation? I think that would be hard to do in a place like this, to say that it has to be a certain distance away from the water.
I'm opposed to that only because I know next to your dock tends to be where people might put chairs or putt-putt green, that kind of stuff, and that is the one place they might want turf, even if they're forced to not have turf elsewhere. So I don't know. And it's not like the turf's flying up and into the water, so I don't.
And when it floods, everything's underwater.
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah,
so.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have the same exact concern, because again, yes, everything that runs off goes right into our sewers, which goes right into our water.
My concern is just that I don't think we need the feet from the water, because it just limits very specific people.
Right.
Because everything is so close to the water. 50 feet here, just
Right. No, I agree
Is
with
it-
you.
yeah.
I agree with you. I think the 80-20 and let folks figure out where it is that it's most important to them to have.
Yeah.
Have it.
Just for clarification, I mean, is there a certain point of discussion that we're trying to accomplish tonight? Is there a certain amount of discussion that we want to accomplish? Are we looking to make a recommendation, or is this just discussion?
It's just discussion. I think at some point in the future, we'll bring back a draft ordinance for you to consider, and these were just major elements that I wanted to make sure that there was some degree of board consensus on.
Okay.
So it sounds like, I just want to confirm that all members are on board with this. We will keep the 80-20 ratio, which would require that at least 24% of most residential lots be maintained with vegetative green space. However, for any turf, the applicant does need to demonstrate that it is permeable, whether it's part of that 6% or more. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. A few other considerations. I think that the guidance you just gave me is probably appropriate for a lot of this, but whether turf should be permitted in drainage features and right-of-ways, I believe most ordinances prohibit that. Especially on residential lots, we have swales, and we don't want those chemicals being carried out. So I think it'd be best if we would not allow for it in drainage features.
Does that rights-of-way include like utility easement between your sidewalk and your curb?
It would, yes.
Because I've seen houses that have turf there.
It has been permitted in the past.
Oh, okay,
So
okay.
this would just be moving forward if
Okay.
Go ahead.
any thoughts on that?
Well, I was already on to the next one. Sorry, I'm reading ahead.
I agree with what you're
I
saying.
agree with what you said as well. Yeah.
Okay. So other ordinances prohibit turf in historic or redevelopment districts or require it to be located behind the buildings. I think we just talked about putting greens. Someone may want to have that in the back of their home, but Would you want to prohibit turf in, it would be currently the Paso Grill and the Gulf Boulevard?
It
and
might be
downtown?
something for the Historic Commission, but it just seems logical that you couldn't have a historic house with turf in front of it. It just doesn't seem logical.
I agree.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well, but I would want to defer to them on whether not visible turf is what their opinion is.
Although you have so many, again, we're not talking about the house necessarily, but the district, and so now we have more and more modern homes going into the historic district. We see it all the time, and those typically are utilizing turf.
Could
so.
you go from historic district to homes that are declared historic?
Historic
We
homes.
do that. Could we say homes that are declared historic instead of limiting it to a district, or should we not do that? I mean, is there?
I think it's a good question for the historic. I mean,
Yep.
that's really their area of focus. So I don't feel comfortable making a recommendation to them. They're the experts in this area.
And for the redevelopment districts, which is more in the province of the planning board, would you like to hold that to the same standard as residences and businesses elsewhere? They would have the 80-20 split, or?
So in the redevelopment district, their impervious ratio for non-residential is different. It's 0.85, right, versus
Correct.
0.75. So, but they still have the 80-20 split within their 0.85 limitation.
So that would be 3% instead of 6% could be turf, and then the remaining 12 could be, would need to be vegetation.
I feel like I would be fine with that. I mean, PCI, for example, I think it's PCI, they have the turf in front surrounding the parking lot where it would be impossible to set up irrigation well, but then they still have the grass courtyard in the middle. I mean, that seems fine to me.
It's reasonable.
The one next, who has the grass courtyard in the middle?
I thought it was PCI, but it might be Beachcomber. One of those two has turf out front and grass courtyard on the inner, between the two hotel sections. But most of their lot is
Because one of them
grass.
has a grass courtyard as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think most development are going to be very cautious, again, because of how hot it gets, and lawsuits with kids and tourists and things like that, that they're going to be very independent and cautious of where they decide to put a
It's
product
true.
that's going
You can't walk on it barefoot.
Yeah, a product that's going to get that hot. So I don't think we need to I think we're fine with keeping it the same and letting developers.
3%'s pretty minimal too.
Yeah.
Brendan, in the previous slide, under Tampa, they had requirements for underlayment, meaning the stone. Do we have any of that in our requirements at this time?
Not currently. We would bring something back, and I think just for ease of evaluation, because if we are going to be going out to these sites to evaluate on site, we'll have a probably require a sample of the turf and then just the FDOT rated stone. It's consistent. It's easy to identify what it is, instead of having a bunch of different, underlayments that could be variable.
More consistent. yeah.
Okay,
So-
sorry, thank you.
Sure. It sounded like there might be some interest in setting a minimum distance from turf to water bodies, potentially not 50 feet. Does the
I
board
don't-
have any?
I don't know how, with the small lot, I don't know how you really put that.
I don't think there needs to be one.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel the same. I
think
wouldn't
all
want to
the-
get into that.
I'm fine with.
The water moves through everything in St. Pete Beach either way, so I don't think it really impacts it.
And last question was whether the owner needed to cap irrigation when it faces towards areas of the site where turf is newly installed.
I would hope they'd want to.
Yes.
I don't know
For
if
a
I'd
lot
want-
of reasons.
This is the last thing code enforcement is going to have time to go look at. I mean, usually it's sprinklers spraying across the street. I wouldn't want to create that burden.
They look at that at time of permitting, or at time of final inspection, I would assume, to show that it's capped, and if somebody wants to go through the work of undoing that for the work, so. Yeah, I would agree with that as
Okay.
a condition.
Well, I think that's sufficient to move forward. We will put something together, bring it back in either probably January or February. I did just want to mention that due to limited staffing, we would like it to be front-loaded, so we are going to ask the applicant to bring in these, example of the turf specifications and so on up front, and then we'll do a limited on-site inspection.
Yeah, definitely.
Bless you.
So, okay, thank you.
All right, anyone have any other items? No? All right, this meeting is adjourned.